Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, radio personality and author, Turi Ryder.
It is just about 5 minutes after 2 o'clock for Joan Esposito. I am, in fact, Turi Ryder. Across from me at the controls, Lady B, very spiffy in her union tee, as opposed to a union suit, because that's underwear. She'll be taking your calls. I'll be taking your texts. Have you noticed something about all of the Trump nominees that seems to be the consistent thread? I don't mean where they've got their noses. That would be one thing. You're right. One thing about where they've placed their noses against the backside, lovingly against the backside of the Donald. There is that. But 2 words, make that 3 words, keep showing up every time the man makes an appointment, announces his candidate, his preferred choice. Can you guess? Can you guess what those words are? I'll tell you. I'm not going to make you sit around and wonder. I am not. The words that keep coming in next to every candidate's name. No experience. No experience. And I'm thinking, what is this? Some kind of new qualification? No experience? Well, if that's the case, if qualifying for a job is that you don't have any idea how to do it, well, there are a few jobs you might like to apply for. What job would you like to have if the criteria for applying and being accepted were absolutely no experience at all? I've got a list. I'm starting a list. Jobs I'd like to have. Jobs I'd like to have with no experience. I have no experience, but given the fact that our country is now going to be run by people apparently with no experience, or if you're on the congressional side, no spine at all, then great. Here we go. My first pick, I think I would like to run a hedge fund. I would love to run a hedge fund. I don't have the foggiest idea what a hedge fund really is or what it really does, but I would like to run one. Why? Because the word that always appears next to hedge fund is always billionaire. I would like to be a hedge fund billionaire. I have 0 experience, but I think I can do it. I think I can do it. Also, opera singer. No idea how to be an opera singer. I used to be able to carry a tune pretty well. And I think I could learn on the job. Opera singer, also no experience. But I think I could do it. Also, surgeon. Those people are so important. So important. You get a good surgeon and so many wonderful things could happen. I have had surgeons save my life. Literally, more than once. And so, if no experience is necessary, I'll just ask the nurse to draw a dotted line down the area that I'm supposed to cut open, and I think I can figure it out from there. I had that game Operation. Okay, my next door neighbor did, but I played that game Operation as a kid, the one where if you hit the sides, the nose lights up and it goes, I could do that job with no experience. And the one that I've talked about before, airline pilot. What's there to it? Everything's automatic, right? The plane goes up, the plane comes down. Who really needs experience? You fly a lot, you sort of know how it goes, right? You give them your bags. They say, welcome aboard. Instead of turning right, you turn left. How hard is that? Have a nice comfy seat. You don't have to worry about anybody kicking the back of your chair. I think being an airplane pilot, an airline pilot, more to the point, is the best job that I could ask for with no experience. And they make good money too. If you have a job that you would love to do with no experience, because apparently, according to the president-elect, it does not matter. He just picked a guy named John Phelan. Of course, you've never heard of him. A businessman with no military experience. I'm not even sure this guy knows CPR. To be Secretary of the Navy. I'll give you a moment. I'll give you a moment because stuff's coming out of your nose right now. I know. You're trying to keep it in. Secretary of the Navy, no military experience. So again, I say, why not be a hedge fund manager, opera singer, surgeon, airline pilot? What have you always wanted to do? And you have no experience at it, but you would like to do it. And now that we're reimagining government, now that we're eliminating the waste, which apparently translates into hiring people who know what they're doing, and it's just going to be, people who want to sit up in front of Congress on TV for a few minutes because they've done everything else. I mean, these guys, these billionaires that he's nominating, there's really nothing they haven't done yet, because if money can buy it and they were interested, they've done it. But they haven't run the United States government yet. Well, behind the scenes with their donations, but they haven't officially. So these guys, they've given millions and billions in dark money to various PACs, but they never got to be on television as officially running the government. And now they can. Woo! What a thrill. What a thrill for a hedge fund billionaire, which, by the way, I understand several of those jobs are going to be open now because several of the guys, always white guys, running these hedge funds, they're going to be running our military, our intelligence operations, our health and well-being services. They're going to be running all of that. And so there'll be openings. So if you always wanted to be a hedge fund manager, hey, there are jobs available now. That's the best part about it. And according to President Trump, and I just want to say in all seriousness, where is the humility in these people? Like, if somebody came to you and said, you have a lot of money, you've given a lot of money, I'd like you to run a major county hospital, you would probably say, that's a lovely offer, but honestly, I think I'm best situated to continue supporting these organizations. I'm not an expert. I don't know how to run a hospital, and so I think I would rather leave that to someone who has some experience. But this war on higher education and the quote, close quote, elites, this is where it's gotten us. The idea that if you actually know what you're doing, that's bad. You know what, Lady B? Let's just go flag somebody down the street and let them run the board over here. No experience. But hey, they've always wanted to run a radio show. Why not? What's to it? Lady B is flipping out like, no. Don't worry, they can't do it. They can't do it. They'll sit down in front of all these buttons and they'll just start randomly pushing things. Aren't you just a little bit worried about this whole idea that there's no experience? And aren't you even more? I mean, the hubris, just as an example, because he's the latest indignity to cross my computer screen. This guy, John Phelan, with no experience as Secretary of the Navy, doesn't that tell you everything you need to know that he would even accept this appointment? Because the correct answer is, thank you so much, Mr. President-elect. I'm very flattered. I'm very honored. But I think you really need somebody in this job who knows what he or she is doing. Or they. Nope. So the other thing you know about these guys, and it's mostly guys, except for good old Tulsi whack job Gabbard, she is a nut, isn't she? She's like a toasted nut. She's just insane. Goes to meet with Bashar al-Assad, who's dropping chemical weapons on his own people. Yeah, you want to talk to him because clearly your good looks and common sense will win him over. But back to the hubris of all of this. The thing that you really have to wonder is exactly what it might take for the Senate and the Congress to grow a little spine. Instead, they're all going to Donald Trump. Well, he should have whatever he wants. He won the presidency. If my kid comes home and tells me that, he has won a seat on the student council, I don't go, okay, great, well, choose what we're having for dinner. That's not a perk of the job to just get anything you want. It's not. The perk of the job is you get your own helicopter and plane, and you get no sleep, and you actually have to talk to people sometimes and listen to what they're saying, even more important, none of which this president. And if you're not willing to do that, at least you do what he did the first time around, which is appoint some experts. And then your patience with their expertise wears thin in about 15 minutes, and you fire them and say bad things about them. That's what he did last time. But this time, and he told everybody and he warned everybody, and you shouldn't be surprised. This time he said, yeah, we're going to clean house and we're going to have people who do what I say. It's almost like a domestic abuse relationship. As long as we keep our heads down, Senate, as long as you say nothing, as long as you keep your head down, as long as you don't stick your little turtleneck out of your little shell, you'll be all right. Well, no, we won't. No experience. I swear, if I read no experience, no prior experience, one more time for a Trump pick, I may just do a Rumpelstiltskin through this soundproof studio floor. And the hits just keep on coming. Let's go to Roosevelt in Chicago. Welcome. You're on WCPT, the Joan Esposito Show. Hi.
Tori, thank you for taking my call. And happy Thanksgiving to you and yours.
Thank you.
Okay. When you mentioned this no experience thing,
yeah,
it hit my mind. And I thought about this a while back, but you just brought it back up. And that is, even though they may have experience, such as the lady from Florida.
Pam Bondi. That's Pam Bondi.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's my rhetorical to you. Why would any woman want to work for him after the things he has done and spoke against women?
Well, because it's amazing how many women voted for him. I mean, it really is. And the first time they knew everything they needed to know, but they believe there is this sort of magical thinking. And I really got clear on this when I was door knocking in Wisconsin. There are two things. Number one, the economy. They really believe, and I'm not sure how, because when he left office last time, we had a pandemic raging and over 1 million people dying. And the one good thing he did was get a vaccine out eventually. But they believe the economy was better under Trump. And two, they believe, and data after data point keep coming in, that he's not going to do what he says. Well, he doesn't seem to give a rip about the economy right now, and he certainly is doing what he said. So women down the line still came out heavily in favor of the other side, but enough of them, and also men who were traditionally Democrats, you can blame a lot of this on them. I like to blame the men. Why not? So I'm going to blame the men, Roosevelt. Thank you for calling. Yeah, it was mostly them, as usual. We're gonna lighten it up. We're going to talk a little bit of festive holiday weekend in a moment, because I need to calm down. We are WCPT, live, local, and progressive. It's 217.
Amy Goodman reports on the news stories rarely covered by the corporate media. Democracy Now!
The UN's Humanitarian Affairs Office warned Palestinian children are at high risk of injury or death from unexploded ordnance left after more than 13 months of Israeli attacks. 8-year-old Mohammed Karmash, this is his mother.
No one was there to tell him that these are explosives that the Israelis throw.
Democracy Now! Weekday evenings at 10 on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk. Hey Google, play WCPT.
Streaming Chicago's Progressive Talk from TuneIn.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, radio personality and author Turi Ryder.
It is, and I am. 18 minutes after 2 o'clock, I am Turi Ryder. Joining me now, because, I can't lose my mind forever. We're just going to reel me back down like a Thanksgiving Day parade balloon. Just going to reel me in slowly, deflate me just a little bit. And we're going to speak with Phil Purevich. He is the executive producer of Chicago's Thanksgiving Parade. Welcome, Mr. Purevich. Glad to have you with me on WCPT.
Thank you for having me on today.
Well, I know that as a person of a certain age, I grew up glued to my TV set for the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. And it was only recently that I became vaguely aware that, what the heck, Chicago has one. So talk a little bit about the parade, if you would.
Sure. This parade actually has a long history here in Chicago, but it was first started as a Christmas parade in 1934. It was produced on State Street and referred to as the Christmas Caravan. And it was just as the nation was coming out of the Great Depression, and business leaders on State Street thought a parade would, one, be a great way to raise everyone's spirits, have people come out and, share some community enjoyment. And they also thought it could be an economic vehicle to get people back to the street and shop for the holidays.
Well, it must have worked because you're still doing it, right?
That's right. That's right. And the transition to the history, it remained a Christmas parade, produced the first Saturday in December through 1983. And then it started being produced the Saturday after Thanksgiving. And we had a few title sponsors, and it was the McDonald's Children's Charities Parade, then the Bronx Kids Parade, and then eventually Marshall Fields became the title sponsor, and that's when we moved it to Thanksgiving proper in 1999. And that's been our home on Thanksgiving ever since.
So the point of the parade then would be to give people some festive enjoyment and also to get them out shopping, which some of us, I must say, I'm not a Christmas celebrant, but I always find it a little alarming to see people move straight into Christmas almost at Halloween time. And this is a nice way, I guess, to slow people down a little and say, well, we have another occasion. What differentiates the Thanksgiving Day parade in Chicago from a Christmas parade? What's different about it?
Sure. You actually share, I share your same perspective that, we've got a holiday, in October for Halloween that everybody, loves and gears up for. We've got a holiday in November that everybody loves and gears up for. And for us, we do want to treat it as a Thanksgiving celebration and not as a Christmas parade. So, for instance, our marching bands, some Christmas music sounds nice at the parade, but we don't want all of our marching bands playing Christmas music. When we theme our show, we really theme it on cultural diversity of Chicago. So we like to have units that represent the cultural diversity and even share their traditions and cultures to how they celebrate Thanksgiving here in America. And at the end of every great Thanksgiving parade, it's Santa Claus. And as it should be, Thanksgiving is the door that opens into Christmas. So the very last unit, Santa Claus, and when that unit comes through, people are at home getting ready for their meals and then getting ready for the next season to celebrate, which is Christmas time.
So what, I guess I should ask you, and first let me note that I understand that Thanksgiving is not Thanksgiving for First Nations of this country. And so we are going to spend a few minutes to talk with an Indigenous leader in the community to talk a little bit about what this day is like for that community. But for the rest of us, the fact that you have mentioned asking people to bring their own traditions reminds me of one of the great joys of Thanksgiving. If you work in broadcasting, which I traditionally have most all my life, one of the pleasures when you get off the air, it gets dark early, and I used to drive around the city, and people have their window shades up at this time often because they're lit up and the houses are lit up and people are gathering in their front rooms, and you get to see all over the city different people's versions of this holiday of gratitude for being here. How does that turn up? How do these cultural differences turn up at the parade? What might we see where you go, oh, well, I didn't know that was how it was done?
Sure. We invite the performance groups to come and perform traditional dances from their culture, from their communities, from, historically from their countries.
Could you be specific? Which countries are represented? I want some specifics, please. Yes.
Specifics. Okay. Well, sometimes my mind doesn't work very well in specifics.
Oh, join the club.
So close to our show date.
Okay. Let me ask you.
No. I could get some of them.
Okay.
But, so we have a group representing Guatemala.
Oh.
We have a group representing Bolivia.
Huh.
We have two groups representing Korea. We have three groups representing China. Let's see. We have a Lithuanian dance troupe.
Oh,
we
wow.
have a Polish dance troupe.
Well, you've got to have a Polish dance troupe. I mean, this is Chicago. Gotta have that.
And we have a Mexican. We have several Mexican performance troops, and we also have one Puerto Rican Puerto Rican performance troupe as well.
That is
Irish,
cool.
Scottish. It's. I'm looking through our list now, so
I'm getting the vibe.
Yeah, that's it.
I'm getting the vibe. It sounds a little bit like I have 2 Lane Tech graduates, and they do a wonderful thing called International Days with dance troupes from the kids from every country. And what's beautiful about it is you don't have to dance with the country that your ancestors hail from. You can move around year to year. One year you can dance with the troupe from India, and one year you can dance with the Polish dancers. It's lots of fun. But these would all be people who are at the highest levels in their community, I'm assuming.
That is correct. They really do want their best performers to be here. It's beautiful to see all these groups here, and they're on live television nationwide on Pluto TV. So we're sharing our parade with the rest of the country. And some of my favorite feedback from viewers around the country is, we love that your parade feels like the city of Chicago, looks like the city of Chicago, and represents all the different cultural communities. It adds such a flavor to the production that other parades don't get. We're truly blessed to have these types of groups, community groups, that want to take part and do such a great job with their productions.
Now I must ask you, balloons. Do you have those big Macy's-style Thanksgiving Day balloons? I've wondered. I've not been to the parade, so do you?
We do, and last year we had 16 balloons, which was wonderful. It was one of our highest totals ever, but we are down in balloons this year. But we do have 3 scheduled to appear. Balloons are very expensive to build or rent, and the helium to fill them is very expensive. And as we are supported by sponsorships and donations, and this year we just didn't quite have enough to have a full-throated balloon experience for our guests. We like to have a minimum of 6. And so as the producer, it really kind of breaks my heart that I couldn't give that number. It really does.
Well,
I feel like I'm letting people down.
Can I make you feel, is that a pun, letting people down? That's a pun. Tell me.
Oh, it wasn't. It wasn't. No, it wasn't. No, I really do. I feel like I'm letting people down.
Well, I have to say, because we do a lot of environmental stuff here on WCPT, there has been a shortage of helium because people have been putting it in their balloons, and where they really need it for medical use, they're having a hard time getting it. Right. So you can comfort yourself with the thought that you are sacrificing balloons in the name of science and medicine. So if that makes you feel any better, then we can.
It does. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm a good comforter when I'm in the mood. When I'm in the mood, hardly ever, but in this case, I'm feeling like I should. Where is the parade, and when is the parade?
The parade is on State Street, that great street in downtown Chicago, and it runs from Ida B. Wells north to Randolph.
And Ida B. Wells used to be called, for people who are going, Ida B. Wells, where is that? It used to be Roosevelt Road, right? Congress, I'm sorry. Congress Parkway. Yeah. Thank you. Boy, I'm really out of it. Congress Parkway. The big one that goes underneath the old, what was that, post office? That's what they...
That's right. That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Right. So that street, all the way to where again? Randolph Street. That's a sizable length, and I guess you're hoping for good weather and that people don't freeze their long johns off?
It is Chicago, and this is the latest date that Thanksgiving could ever be, November 28th. And, we're lucky that weather's seasonable. So I'm out here today on the street, and, people have some hats on and, winter jacket-ish, but I see some other people just walking around in, sweaters and pullovers. Good. And it is going to be a little, tomorrow is going to be a great day for us. It's always a little chilly in the morning when the show starts, but usually by 10 o'clock the sun comes out, or at least the temperatures will warm a bit. And, people bundle, they bring hot cocoa, and it's a real experience to be here. And we have people that now start to get their spots on the sidewalks as early as 4 a.m.
Oh, my goodness.
And it really is. It's one of the things that makes me smile, and it's like, wow, these are some true parade enthusiasts. They like to get there early and get the best seat in the house.
Or you can cheat. And go to Target and go up a couple of floors and just look at it from there, right?
That's pretty funny. I've never even thought about that. That's a great idea.
I'm a sneaky little girl. I really am. Okay. And the start time is, did you say 10 or earlier than that?
8 a.m.
8 a.m.
8 to 11, three-hour show.
Okay. All right. We've got our plans in order, and this is going to be which day for people who didn't note it the first time?
Tomorrow, Thanksgiving morning, everyone's going to wake up in a great mood, and if you can't make it down here, you could always turn it on Pluto TV.
And may I also say that if you have some cooking to get done and you need your visitors to leave you alone in your kitchen for Pete's sakes, send them out to the parade, and you look like a great hostess, and you get them out of your hair. Don't ask me why I say this. Just a thought. just a thought. Phil Purevich, thank you so much for spending time with us, and I'm excited about the parade, and whether you see it in person or whether you see it on Pluto TV, it is ours, uniquely ours, and we appreciate you being here the day before the event. Thank you
so much for having me on, and have a happy Thanksgiving tomorrow.
And to you. That is Phil Purevich, executive producer of the Chicago Thanksgiving Day Parade. You just heard all about it. It's 2:30 in a moment. I just saw a show at the Court Theater. It was a show that first debuted in the 80s, and it had some themes that were really, really unusual for that time. It's an amazing production, and I don't say amazing very often for lots of reasons. You're going to meet its director. The show is Falsettos. The director is Nick Bowling. It's a joint production with the Court Theater and Timeline Theater, and he'll be with us in moments on WCPT, live, local, and progressive.
WCPT replay.
For people saying Trump's some sort of peacenik.
Oh, yeah. You love that?
Yes, thank you for this tweet. You said Trump bombed Syria, Trump bombed Yemen, bombed Somalia. He assassinated a foreign military leader. In Iraq and Syria alone, Trump drone strikes killed an estimated 13,400 civilians. Trump increased troop levels in Afghanistan by 25%. Trump bragged about relaxing rules of engagement in Afghanistan, which nearly doubled civilian casualties. Trump pulled out of the INF, out of the Open Skies Treaty. Trump loves Putin's slaughter of Ukrainian civilians, calling it genius and savvy. Trump pulled out of the Iran nuke treaty, even though our military insisted Iran was complying, so any future Iranian nukes will be 100% thanks to Trump. Thank you, John Fugel, saying...
Here to help.
Here to help. Here at the Stephanie Miller Show. Thank you.
Keep listening to WCPT 820, because facts matter.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, radio personality and author, Turi Ryder.
Oh, sweet. Why, thank you. It's 2:34. I am Turi with a U, Ryder like the truck. And yes, I am an author. And yes, you can ask your local indie bookstore to get my book. I hear it's funny. It's what I hear. It's what my publisher said anyway. Speaking of funny, tonight, 5 o'clock, Patty Vasquez going to drive you home, joined by guest co-host Dwayne Kennedy. And they'll be accompanied by film critic Mike Crowley and car guys Tom Appel and Warren Priest. Hope I've got Priest wrong. Right. Price. I'm sorry, it's Price. What do I know? Drive home with Patty. She's always good for a laugh and for the serious stuff that you need and the information that you need right now. 2:35. As mentioned, I saw Falsettos, a show that was cutting edge about alternative families, HIV, AIDS. It's beautifully staged, beautifully choreographed with, get this, a live orchestra. How often do you get that anymore? At the Court Theater, just near the University of Chicago, if you're wondering where that is. Joining me now, Nick Bowling, Assistant Artistic Director at the Timeline Theater. And this was a joint production. Nick, welcome. You're on WCPT.
Hi, Tori. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm delighted to have you here for so many reasons. Talk about, the first thing I want to know is, why did you choose this play with all of the, I mean, we pretty much have the HIV epidemic managed, I think would be a good way to say it here in this country. Maybe you would disagree with that term, but I that's how I think of it. And alternative families very much under discussion this election campaign, but there may be other reasons you chose this play, or those may be reasons. Why?
a couple things. One is this is two theater companies coming together in two different missions. Court's mission is plays inspired by history that connect to today's social. Sorry, that's time. Sorry,
that sounds like Timeline. Yeah,
Timeline's mission is plays. That's my theater company, by the way. It's our company who's co-producing plays inspired by history that connect to social political issues of today. And then Court's mission is classic plays. Well, when Court asked me about this play, I said, the thing is, I think this play should be starting to be considered part of another kind of a classic play, a gay classic canon. And this is really about a man who's come out of the closet at age 40 and decides he's going to tell his wife and son and try to kind of create a new kind of family. That may be not brand new today, but it was terribly brand new in 1979. The very idea of a play in 1979 with characters that are rich and complicated and, in fact, a gay character that is not a victim, that's not a joke, that's not just there to be kind of cute and the neighbor, but in fact it's the central character, really makes it such an important play in the canon of musical theater, but in fact you could say in the canon of American theater. So there's that. And then I've really been looking at this from kind of a perspective of I was a 10-year-old kid during the time of this play. 79 to 81 is when the play is set. And I was a 10 to 12-year-old kid during that time, the same age as the son in this show. And what I'm interested in is looking at this play and this time and trying to understand the ripple effects that AIDS and being in the closet and the response and frankly, those Reagan years of conservatism during all the 80s that lasted into the 90s for sure, what effects those had on not only all Americans, but on me, and especially on in particular on gay men, because what Marvin does in this play was not the norm, was not easy to do. Marvin being the one who comes out of the closet and who starts to date a young man.
In those days, that's another thing. Yeah. There are so many. I have some quibbles with the play and bringing it out now, and some of I'll get to those in a second. But I absolutely agree. As the mother of a young adult gay male, there's stuff where I just can't even believe he has no awareness of how things used to be.
That's right.
The first time he ran into somebody at work who told him in cloaked language that he sounded too gay. He called me up and he said, "Is that a homophobic?" I said, "Absolutely, that's a homophobic remark, that you should try to sound more authoritative when you speak to the boss." And you know exactly what he's saying. That's what he's saying. Yeah. You're not imagining it. Yeah. And then I thought, have I done a decent job as a parent in this show? That's an issue. How do I do a good job as a parent preparing my kid for what it's like to have, in this case, a dad with a boyfriend at all, never mind a much younger boyfriend.
That's right.
And there was no such thing as gay marriage at the time. But the first wedding that both my kids ever went to was two men at our synagogue. That was the first wedding that they ever attended. And the younger one, who happens to be straight, said, "I don't understand what's the big deal." And I thought, well, thank goodness. And then the other, I'll just tell you this one other story. There was the kids went to a Jewish day school, and there was a birthday party in the park. This wasn't a big, showy birthday party kind of school. It was Berkeley. It was kind of, Oakland, Berkeley funky. And someone had mistakenly picked the park that was near the big lunchtime trysting place for a quickie. And you'd see these men pulling in very expensive cars and racing into the bushes. And it took me only a minute to figure out. And some of the other mothers who were a little more protected were like, what? And that gave me the opportunity to say to my kid, what you're seeing here a lot of the times are people, guys with wedding bands on. These are people who cannot be themselves. And nothing, in your mother's opinion, I said to my kid, nothing but heartache comes from not being able to be yourself. And this, of course, was years before either of, the kid came out. But I had my suspicions even then. So that part, I think it's really important for a show, if you have family and you've wanted an opportunity to speak to them about what it was like. This play is a great door that opens to that.
What you're talking about is so integral to the show, too. Marvin, who's 40 years old, has been in the closet 40 years, his entire life, and in some ways it has stunted his growth. He's a child. He's the same age socially as his 10-year-old or 12-year-old son. That's a key part to the whole show and to making the show work, because the show's about growing up. It's about the bar mitzvah kind of ceremony and that idea of a child kind of growing into a man. And frankly, that's the exact same thing that Marvin's doing because of being inauthentic by living a kind of a closeted life, which there are plenty of people that are still living that life and that inauthentic life. It's in some ways you can take that beyond the gay situation and to anybody that's not really living their own true self, and the danger of that and how it becomes something not just dangerous for themselves, but also for the people around them.
Yes, you point that out in your direction of the wife, Marvin's wife, Trina, right, who she doesn't quite know what to do. She's catching syphilis. She's catching, clearly something's going on, and she's got herself sort of mesmerized that if she just does everything perfectly, that by the way, one of the funniest scenes in the whole play is her making a dinner with great fury. I loved that. But you've brought me to something that I have to ask you about, which is the whole bar mitzvah thing, which is featured in the program, talked about a lot on the stage. And I, as a Jewish person, which I am, an observant Jewish person, found a lot of the presentation of Judaism really objectionable. I was shocked. I'd never seen the show before, and frankly, I don't even want to use some of the words that I thought when I heard the kids say, "This is going to be my bar mitzvah. It's my chance to be rich," and I just thought, that's disgusting. And there's a lot, and the whole idea, and it's presented in the program, this is a middle-class Jewish family. Well, I know lots of middle-class Jewish families who are not like that. It's the same as saying all black families have somebody in prison. It's absurd. It's not true. And it does a great disservice to the diversity of the community. And then this family is presented as though all they care about is the guest list and the gifts, and there's no concept in there of cultural values. And I found that really upsetting. Can you speak about it?
I can. I'm not the writer, so those decisions are William Finn and James Levine, two Jewish men who both kind of worked on creating the story back in the late 70s.
And they're Jewish. And they're Jewish.
They're both Jewish.
I would say that I've met a lot of self-hating Jews, and that play felt about as self-hating as anything I've ever seen by a Jewish person, including members of my family who are also not too fond of being Jewish.
Yeah, and I think the only way I can defend it is to say this is William Finn, that it's his experience. This is his point of view about his life, his family. He wrote it it's a very personal story. As what James Levine actually came and saw the show, who wrote the quote-unquote book, which really I think he directed it as well, which really meant he kind of helped kind of shape the whole thing. But mostly this is William Finn's work, the writer of the music. And I think Finn, really, the two lesbian characters from next door are his two best friends who are two lesbians from next door. So I think this is very, and Levine said William Finn is Marvin, the leading character in the show. So I think he's writing personally about his life. Now, I can't disagree with you or argue your point about that. But what I can do is say I think that's his point of view, and then my job and our job as artists is to try to make the most sense out of that. And I think he sees it as a comedy, so he's definitely trying to write it with a kind of tongue in the cheek oftentimes, and also people that are not necessarily fully embracing Judaism at some point in their life, but I think who begin to realize how important it may be to their lives. That's sort of a journey for them throughout the show. Again, it speaks to Marvin's selfishness and to the kind of brokenness of that relationship and the brokenness that comes out of his other kind of secret life, basically.
Well, that's as good an explanation as anyone could possibly have given me. If I had Finn in a room, I would say you can be funny about being who you are without there are plenty of people all over the internet. You can hear Modi, a gay Jewish comedian, talking about, all different aspects of his life and relationship. There are a lot of funny. There are a lot of ways to be funny and not denigrate your culture. And I think that the fact that the program doesn't even deal with it was disturbing. And I wanted to note that, because I feel like if everybody just shuts up, then we're right back in the culture that produced Marvin in the first place. If there's something going wrong and it just seems to despise your culture, even if the fact that you come from there does not give you the right to say that everyone is like this. And I guess I wish that somewhere it had been noted that this was his personal experience growing up, and it attempts to universalize it to the whole culture, and that's a hard one to swallow. So now I've made myself known, but I want to talk to you more about the staging of the show and what it's like to take a whole slice of an era and put it up on stage for people, and what you're hearing back from folks. So stand by, and we'll get right back to it. It's Nick Bowling, Associate Artistic Director of Timeline Theater, which in collaboration with Court Theater in Hyde Park has put together a beautiful staging of the landmark show Falsettos. And we'll hear more from him in a moment. It's 2:47.
WCPT 820, Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, radio personality and author Turi Ryder.
Just about 10 minutes to 3. And if you missed Joan, and who doesn't miss Joan, although she's entitled to a week off, you can now hear Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on its very own podcast, or podcasts, perhaps we should say. Joan Esposito full episodes and Joan Esposito featured interviews. You can subscribe to one or to both. They're available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and Amazon. So just search Joan Esposito or get the links on Joan's show page by visiting heartlandsignal.com and clicking on her picture. And if you miss Joan, you can hear her older shows, or if you want to hear this show again, it will also be up under Joan's podcasts. Joan comes back next week. I think now you know where to find Joan, and now you get to find Nick Bowling of Timeline Theater in their co-production with Court Theater, a production that's been put on, I guess now 3 iterations. There was or maybe 4. It was originally 2 small playlets that were joined and went to Broadway, off-Broadway, I guess, in the 80s, and then went to Broadway in, 86? And correct me on this, Nick, when I get it wrong, and then was revived in 2016, and now it is a world-class production at the Court Theater. And I don't say that lightly. Have I got that a chronology about right?
Mostly, except for the first Broadway revival is 91, not 86, but you're close otherwise.
Okay.
You did really well otherwise, yeah.
Thank you. My Blue Book test has been marked as pass by the director. I take that.
Right.
It's a good sign.
Right.
What are you hearing from people, and I'm sure you are hearing from people, gay and straight and non-traditional, about what they're taking from this show, Falsettos, with the non-traditional configuration of a family, which in this time and age is really coming under fire again?
Yeah, you hit on something earlier, which is that there's an interesting kind of difference between in particular when we're talking about the gay community, between the young gay community and the older gay community. The older gay community, which I sort of count myself in, although in some ways I'm a little bit between them, but I feel like I'm in that older gay community group. They've all, of course, loved this play because it's nostalgic to them, and it's a world to them that they don't want to forget, and a lot of them, we did an amazing talk back the other day with 2 people that both, one of who is a trans woman who's been living with AIDS for 30 years, a gay man who kind of sidestepped AIDS for during that time period, and then a doctor who started the first AIDS clinic in Chicago. And for them, this was a kind of a reminder, and especially Caprice, who is a black trans woman, that said, this is this sort of show reminds especially that younger generation whose shoulders they're standing on, and it helps us understand something about, well, just about homophobia, about how hard this was, about the mistakes that were made all over the place around, of course, the mistakes that are obvious, I think, to most of us now that are around this play, but how those mistakes around the play, meaning an incredibly conservative country that much of which turned its back on gays, many people that believe that gay folks should die, that AIDS was a way to get rid of gay people, et cetera, but then how that affected in internal relationships of gay people. That's what I think the play is powerful at, and it shows gay folks as really messy, really imperfect. And some people might say, "Oh, I don't like that. I don't want them to be. I don't want Marvin to be the bad guy that he kind of is in this show because he's our protagonist." But actually, I think that's his strength because it shows this kind of reality about the truth of who we are.
That's
that we're
true.
Not this.
That's true. Nobody is static. People. Yeah. I'm interrupting you a little bit here, but I think. The point that you're making is that nobody is static. Everyone is on a path, including, and I want to talk about this a little bit, the much younger boyfriend. And we'll get to that in just a second. I want to point out that you have picked this play at a time when there's a lot of cultural conversation about how it used to be. I'm thinking of Rebecca Mackay and her book, which, of course, the name. Thank you, about what it was like in Chicago during the early days of HIV and when nobody knew. And there was a documentary. We had the documentarians out about the two bar owners who went to the city council here in Chicago to make it illegal to throw somebody out of their home because they were gay, because people thought that they could make the whole building sick by living there. There's a lot of that. But what I think the play does nicely, as you already pointed out, is it uses humor so that we are willing to look at how awful things were, but still understand that these were complex people with emotionally rich lives, and that even in dark times, they found a way forward and made it better so that, you got a pill that you can take so you can still have sex and not worry that that it'll kill you. So it's advertised. It's advertised on television. Amazing.
Right. I have to tell you something that Rebecca Mackay actually came in and spoke with us, which was really an amazing day.
Oh, good.
We're very lucky to have her come in and kind of share with us some of the research that she did, and we all got to ask her questions, and she signed everybody's books and all that,
That's
really
nice.
Yeah.
I'm glad she did that. I mean, I still remember when I was a rock jock, believe it or not, on a big top 40 station in this town. For some reason, people seemed to understand that they could talk to me about stuff, and I used to get the most interesting phone calls, and I was asked, I don't know how this even happened, to come to a hotel room and speak with the gentleman who invited me was a gay man, and he was accompanying and trying to assist a young man or a young person, I should say, who was intersex and was trying to figure out what to do with his life. And I knew nothing about any of this, but all I could say was, you get to be whoever you are. That's who you get to be. And nobody gets to make you ashamed of that. And I think that Falsettos really carries that message. So now let's talk about the dynamic of older, younger, which has not changed and which is really hard on some older men. There's a lot of, I guess, what they call lookism in the queer community. And I don't think that's gotten much better. How are you getting a response from couples where one is, 20, 25 years older and another is much younger? And what are you noting from that part of the show?
Well, it's interesting. It's exactly written the ages of those two characters. In our play, I think the two actors are a difference of maybe 8 or 9 years, something like that. I think that's right. Which is a sizable difference, but yes, it's a big part of the gay community. It's almost would be inappropriate to ignore that part of the gay community if you want to be somewhat realistic about the world. In the play, they're very realistic with each other. One says, basically, one one says, hey, you're the pretty one, and the other one says, yeah, and you're the rich one. And these are what we bring to this relationship. You bring stability and wealth and a home, and I bring good looks and fun and energy and sex and that is, in some ways one can be very critical of all that, but also if you go into that eyes wide open, then you can also say that is what each of these people have decided that, and it's good for them and at times, and it's bad for them at times.
I'm glad you said it that way. I'm glad you said it that way because both in gay and straight relationships, if you're 25 years older than your partner, they're there for probably not just your good looks and performance. That's just my
right.
Yeah, I think that should if you don't believe that as the older person. There is a bridge up for sale. Yes. And we're coming to the end of our time together, but if you were just telling people, why they should go see the show in a sentence, what would you give them for that?
Maybe this. It's one of the most surprisingly funny nights that turns into one of the most heartbreaking nights that you'll have at the theater. It's able to contain both of those things.
I love that. That's perfect. Bring a Kleenex and have fun. Thank you so much, Nick Bowling, for the great work you do. I really appreciate it. That's Nick Bowling. He is the director of this amazing reconstruction of falsettos at the Court Theater in conjunction with the Timeline Theater. It's a minute before 3 o'clock. WCPT, live, local, and progressive.
Remember when you get to work to hop over to WCPT820.com or the TuneIn Radio app and stream The Stephanie Miller Show. Weekdays 8 to 11 a.m. on Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. This is WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, radio personality and author Turi Ryder.
Just about 3:05. I am Turi with you, Ryder like the truck. Yes, that is my book. Yes, that is my podcast. If you just put my name in, you will find, put my name in podcast or put my name in book. Otherwise, who knows what untruths you will read about me. And speaking of untruths, there are First Nations here who know that this holiday we're about to celebrate tomorrow is based on a big, fat, whopping untruth. And we would be remiss if we did not include that narrative, which is much more fact-based than everybody's sang, together and had a nice Thanksgiving meal, and isn't it lovely for everyone? It's not so lovely for everyone. And so I'd like you to meet Les Begay of the Diné Nation. He is the co-founder of Indigenous Peoples Day Coalition of Illinois, about what this day tomorrow will mean to them. Welcome, Mr. Begay. Thank you for joining us on WCPT.
Thank you, Tori.
Talk to me about, I had to read a little bit about the history of the founding of the Day of Mourning, but you would be a better one to explain how it came to pass and how you came to have a formal recognition of this terrible thing that had befallen all of the First Nations of North America.
Yes. It started in 1492 and it's extended today. The Day of Mourning is really no celebration for Native people. It's a day of remembrance and sorrow. And it started really in 1621 after the Turi Nations, Wampanoag, Pequot, and the Narragansett helped the colonists learn how to farm. And then so on the 1621, they had a meeting together, but there was no documentation of having anything other than that first meeting to represent the harvest. As the colonists kept coming in from Europe, they wanted more land, and conditions changed. And then that's when really the issue of the Day of Mourning came out. In 1637, from Massachusetts, colonists attacked the Pequot Nation, killed 600 people. And after that, the mayor of that city said this is a day of Thanksgiving. And it kind of stuck. So that's where that comes from. But I think the best way to understand the Day of Mourning is to read what's on the memorial near the Plymouth Rock in Massachusetts. It was put there in 1970 by the United American Indians of New England. It says, Thanksgiving is a reminder of the genocide of millions of Native people and the theft of Native lands and the relentless assault on Native culture. We honor our Native ancestors and the struggles of Native people's survival today.
I think that sums it. And I know there are several branches of thought and effort that are now going into remediation of some harms that were done, and the land back movement, several other environmental approaches. How are those things, or is this strictly mourning, or does one on this day of mourning turn to some of the actions that can be taken to recover even a little of what was stolen from them?
Well, that's a difficult process. It's going to happen. It has happened in some cases. Some states have given some land back.
We did that here. Yeah, we gave back Potawatomi land, I believe, or are in the process of it.
Yes, not quite approved yet, but it's in the process. But Oklahoma, it happened in 2020. So there are places where it has happened, but it's not easy to do. Here in Illinois, it was difficult because we didn't have any federally recognized tribes. That puts pressure on the state and local governments to do that. So it's difficult, but it can be done.
Yeah, it was very impressive. And the story of how there came to be no tribes recognized here was also a scandal. If I understand correctly, the head of the tribe went west to look after his people who he'd sent to safety. And they said, "Oh, you're gone. You're not here. None of you were ever here," if I'm phrasing that accurately. Is that about right?
That's true, and that's probably the nicest replacement of Native people that there hasn't. Typically, they were just forced off their land, forced to move, like the Trail of Tears. Every Native tribe, 574 of us, has a story like the Trail of Tears. Mine and the Diné Nation is called the Long Walk. So we all are moved off of our traditional land and moved away by a government process to eliminate Native people.
If you have allies, and I know that you do, in the non-Indigenous community, what can folks do to be supportive of an effort to remediate some of the wrongs that were done?
It really comes with support. There's only 5 million enrolled Native people in the U.S., and I say enrolled because there's a distinction that it's a little hard to get into at this point, but because we have short time. But with only 5 million of us, there's not much we can do in the political process because that depends on votes. So we need non-Native people to get involved with us, support us, talk to your legislators, because that's how the process is changed. And that's what I've been working on with Indigenous Peoples Day. But the numbers are against us. And I've been told by politicians that it's just not significant enough or important enough for them to make change.
Okay. So we should ask in each individual case, how can we be helpful here?
Yes. Yeah, you should work with Native groups. I mean, you can Google them. We're here. We didn't all disappear in the 1890s.
No, there's a beautiful community garden west of us that is part of the cultural center, and I know that a group that I belong to has made an effort to assist with that, so that traditional crops, traditional techniques, all of that can be passed down, and that's just a small thing that can be done. But basically, when you're offering to help somebody, you let them tell you what they need. So it's been interesting to see the Indigenous people come to power more and more in different states, and in the current cabinet of Joe Biden. Have you noted the presence increasingly of people in positions of decision making?
No, there have been a few, but for the most part, they're not really in that many positions. I think we had 9 or 10 candidates across the country run this year, and only 2 of them won.
Alaska was a bitter pill. I tell you, Alaska just killed me. You must still be upset about that one. So close. All right.
I think before I did, I think this sums up what Native people go through. It's a, quote, by John Trudell, who was one of the founding members of the American Indian movement. He said, historically speaking, we went from being Indians, to pagans, to savages, to hostiles, to militants, to activists, to Native Americans. It's 500 years later, and they still can't see us. We're still invisible.
Wow.
And that's true then, it's true now.
Well, I think that the AIM movement was instrumental in moving the project along, and I'm glad to meet you over the phone and see that you are carrying the mission forward, even if it takes time. And I'm looking forward to improvements for the people who were there before us. You see a lot of people getting upset about other wars in other places and land they feel should be given back, and you think to yourself, all right, well, we'll give yours back too while you're at it. Give or at least make an effort to level the situation. And I thank you so much for speaking candidly about it. That's Les Begay of the Diné Nation, talking a little bit about what tomorrow will be for Native people. He's the co-founder of Indigenous Peoples Day Coalition of Illinois. Keep an eye on what they're up to. It's meaningful and important work. 3:13, Turi Ryder in for Joan Esposito. In a moment, my favorite law professor, David Levine of the University of California at San Francisco Law School, to talk about the constitutional carnage that may be wrought upon us by the president-elect. It's 3:14.
Dive deeper into the heart of the news and stories at WCPT 820 and across the Midwest by checking out our website, heartlandsignal.com.
It's the coverage I can count on every time.
For the latest news updates, in-depth analysis, compelling stories, comprehensive election coverage, live streams, and thought-provoking opinions, head to heartlandsignal.com.
When I need to know, they're there.
They keep me informed and updated wherever I am.
Stay informed with WCPT 820, your go-to source for where facts matter.
You're listening to WCPT 820 because facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, radio personality and author Turi Ryder.
Oh, sweet.
3:16, Joan Esposito's show. I am Turi Ryder in for Joan. Tomorrow is a best of day because other people are going to be doing other things. Joan will be back Monday. If you miss her, you can get her podcast. Just Google Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. It should come up. And tonight, before everybody starts to move into hanging over their stove or somebody else's stove mode, you get to drive home with Patty Vasquez. And if you are in a car with people heading out on a long road trip to family who are distant for the holiday tomorrow, and you don't really feel like talking to them after a little while, I recommend Patty. She will entertain you from 5 to 7. She will drive you home with co-host Dwayne Kennedy. And I happen to really, truly enjoy Tom Appel. She'll be talking to him, too. He's a funny guy. Talk to you about cars while you're driving home. It's just about 3:17. Let's talk to David Levine, professor, fancy-dancy, lawyer, book writer, and my personal friend, and prognosticator of what constitutional damage awaits us under the incoming regime. And David, welcome. I don't know, you probably didn't hear the first hour of the show, but I've decided there are several jobs that I want now that it appears that the qualification for getting a job is no experience.
You and me, sister.
Yeah, so far
I agree. I'm waiting for my call.
Yeah. Oh, good. What is the dream job that you have no experience for, but that you would nevertheless like to have?
Well, I'd kind of like to be Surgeon General of the United States, having had no medical experience except being a patient.
Yeah, that qualifies you now. Yeah. I want to be a hedge fund manager. I've decided I should be a hedge fund manager. Lots of openings. An opera singer would be lovely. A surgeon. I don't even need to be Surgeon General. I feel like they could draw the dotted line right where I'm supposed to cut, and I could do that. And as you've known for years, I've always said, what is there to being an airline pilot? You go up, you come down, you just turn right when you start turning right. When you come in to the cabin, you turn left, and the seat is better.
There you go.
Yeah, and there are more
Maybe
buttons.
You could run the FAA and do air traffic control out of O'Hare.
Yes, air traffic control. Oh my God, there is a job. Have you ever listened to the air traffic control channel, which you can get on your phone?
Well, I have on planes. For a time, I think American Airlines would let you listen in. on the traffic between the captain and the air traffic control, and that seems scary enough to me, let alone another 100 people, another 100 planes to control.
Absolutely. I can tell you that as I've been a passenger in a car driving past O'Hare, and just for fun, I turned on, I think it's WOH, it sounds like O'Hare, whatever it is, and they have several control towers, if I have this correct. And even just listening to one of them, I could feel my blood pressure just coming up. Just by the time we drove 5 miles, I think I was almost in stroke territory. And those people do it for a living. And now that we're going to have Mehmet Oz running all the healthcare stuff, I'll know that my government healthcare is going to disappear. So I can just have that stroke and wait for somebody to come and arrange my funeral. That's how it's going to be. Tell me what are the most constitutionally dangerous things you are seeing going on now before the gentleman even takes office?
Well, let's see. Where do we begin?
It's a long list, isn't it? Long list.
Yeah, it is. Because, the one that was first going to come up is the question of whether the Senate is going to roll over and play dead and not exercise their constitutional duty to give advice and consent to all of these appointees. Mr. Trump was trying to avoid that process, but it looks like the Senate is going to insist on that. So that's one. Another one is impoundment of funds. The Project 2025 folks who are coming right back in after all the denials. Mr. Trump didn't know anything about them. They want to talk about pushing money around in ways that are unconstitutional because what you learn in high school civics is Congress has the power of the purse, and then the purpose of the executive branch is to execute what the legislature tells them to do. That'll be another one.
Let me pause you for a moment because I was aware that they were going to try and just not spend this money that Congress has decided to appropriate for. And mind you, nothing's getting through easily. It's been such a close process of negotiation because in the last presidential term, the Congress and the Senate were so almost evenly divided that by the time they decided to spend money on something, you can pretty much bet it was essential. So I knew that this process of impoundment, if it were legal at all, would allow them to stop spending the money. But are you telling me that you could legally redirect it under this process?
Well, in the past, they made some efforts. So, for example, to what extent could you take money that's specifically for certain purposes within the Department of Defense, let's say, and decide that it needs to be spent on
Elon Musk.
Immigration?
Oh, I thought you were going to say on Elon Musk and his rocket ship.
Well, that too, right? That too. Let's move things from, let's say, troops in Eastern Europe supporting NATO to helping to build rockets to go to Mars. That kind of thing. It depends on how specific Congress has been, whether they, appropriate program by program as they usually do. But there's always been that push and pull with Congress. But especially last time really anybody pushed this was Nixon, and he lost.
Oh, I love this story. Explain that story. A lot of people are younger. They don't remember what Nixon tried to do. It's a good one.
Well, what they try to do is what's called a line item veto, which would be to pick out parts of the appropriation budget that they didn't like, and then again do the so-called impoundment, which would be say we're not going to spend money. Congress has told us to spend money on a particular program. Let's say I'm just going to pull something out of the air. But let's say free lunch for poor kids at public schools. And they just say, no, that's a frill. We're not going to spend that money. The president from time to time has tried to do that, but typically they've been shot down in the courts and that they've been told, no, once Congress has appropriated the money and specified where it goes, that money has to be spent. The president's power is to negotiate and to use the veto, but the veto is either it's all acceptable or none of it is acceptable in any one bill. What presidents want to do is pick and choose what they like, and that's something they can't do under our federal system.
Well, we thought, for example, that abortion rights were secure, and it turns out that they were not. Is there any hope in hell that this Supreme Court would stand up to President elect Trump and say, no, you can't do that, it's already established? Or might they roll over, like the Senate may roll over?
Well, the majority in the Supreme Court's record of standing up has not been very good. I have to say that. And so that even though we saw many of them swear under oath to the Senate Judiciary Committee that Roe was a super precedent and wouldn't be reexamined, of course, they turned over and changed that. They surprised us with the immunity decision. So, you have to say that an awful lot is fair game at this point. So what I can do as a law professor is to say, well, under normal rules, these precedents are quite strong, and if judges were to follow those precedents, then this would be the result. But the Supreme Court does have a lot of power. If you can get 5 people or even 6 to say, no, we made a mistake in the past, and now we're going to go a different way, yes, they can do it. Under our system, yes, they can.
Yep. Somebody has said and printed, and a lot of people actually have said this, but what's becoming clear is how much of our government ran on the honor system.
Right.
And,
totally.
And now, if you really, anyone who's ever been to court for like a small claims court and you get a judgment in your favor, that's a judgment in your favor, but good luck necessarily getting it executed, because the court isn't going to, we don't have debtor's prison. There's nobody going to go to jail in a civil court for not following the ruling. And it's almost as though the people who have ill will or disregard for the system know it. They just know that, specifically our president-elect, he has now proven that if you simply don't care what the courts say, you can almost always get away with it.
Well, not almost always, but he has had tremendous luck, without a doubt. Now, the other thing I was thinking of is Mr. Giuliani. Of course, when you're talking about debt and debtor's prison, of course, he's putting on a master class of how not to defend yourself in that defamation lawsuit and how not to protect your assets from collection. He had quite almost a shouting match with the judge yesterday or the day before in New York, as Ruby Freeman and Shea Moss are on the verge of taking away an awful lot of Mr. Giuliani's assets.
And won't that be fun? The guy has 2 homes. He's got one in New York, one in Florida, and Florida is way more Giuliani friendly these days. So I would think he would have no problem going to Florida and living out the rest of his life smoking cigars and drinking whatever it is he drinks so much of.
One of the issues is going to be whether or not he can protect that nice Florida condo from this collection action. The New York condo is already going over to Freeman and Moss, although Giuliani's got to sign over the documents. But the Florida one, he might lose that as well. And
really?
That's something subject to a later hearing, because the issue there is whether it is his primary residence, because Florida is very friendly to debtors in the sense that you can get a big fat house and if it is indeed your primary residence, it's protected from creditors. Remember good old O.J. Simpson? Why did he move from Los Angeles, where I am today, over to Florida? It wasn't to find the real killers. It was to protect his money, because Florida is more debtor-friendly than California is. And so Mr. Giuliani is trying to protect that condo. I don't know that he's going to be able to, because he has really, by being so stubborn and cavalier, he's really painted himself into quite a corner with the judge, who is rapidly losing patience with him. He may find himself in jail. It's not debtor's prison, but for contempt of court for failing to play ball with the administrative process here.
Which, in my opinion, is exactly where Donald Trump should have found himself, but I don't get to make the rules. I just get to watch them fall apart.
Right, exactly. If you ever have lunch with Chief Justice Roberts, you can tell him thank you very much for that result.
I'm sure he's told that now. What? Okay, you're on the inside. You know these judges. You hang around with some of them, the upper echelon justices, not the Supremes necessarily. But what do you suppose, if there is any social fallout for these people, what do you suppose that's like?
Well, the circles that they travel in are such that they probably just get pats on the back about it. Of all of them, I think it's Kavanaugh is the one who probably is most sensitive to this because until he became a justice when he was, a judge on the D.C. Circuit, he's more sociable. He grew up in Washington, went to schools there, famously, coached girls basketball for high school.
Creepy.
And I think he does care about some of that opprobrium in a way that those take the other end. A Thomas or Alito who just seems to take pleasure in doing things that are going out of their way to do things that will annoy people. So there's a range in terms of what whether that social pressure affects them or not.
That's interesting because it did appear to affect in a tiny teensy-weensy way the president-elect. I mean, he left New York. He got tired of being hissed at and booed. And that was happening. I mean, that was his daughter went to Florida because none of her friends turned out to be her friends, at least the people who knew her when. Before she
when they thought she and Jared believed different things when they were kind of mainstream, if you will, Upper East Side liberal Democrats.
Yes.
The way Trump was.
Yeah.
The way Trump was when he was a developer. He was pro-choice. He gave money to Democratic causes. Hillary and Bill Clinton went to the wedding of Melania and Donald. So he was tight with all those people until he saw another way to power.
Right. Well, okay, back to the listing of constitutional disasters that await us. Assuming that the Senate does not just roll over, and I never thought I would say this, but Mitch McConnell may be our saving grace here.
Right, because
I can't even say it with a straight face. I can't say it because they need 4.
We'll see if he's liberated by not being majority leader anymore. We will see if he's kind of liberated to vote his conscience a bit, at least as to the very most controversial of these cabinet choices, the ones who could really do damage. The ones who are merely incompetent, maybe they can get a pass here, but the ones who could really do damage. Tulsi Gabbard at the Defense National Intelligence Agency, Kennedy at Health and Human Services, Hegseth at Defense. Those are the ones that are really have potential to cause us tremendous damage in a short time.
Yeah, I would even say that Kennedy, I think, tick, 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 kaboom. I don't think he'll be around. It's the people they're appointing to the specific agencies who I think will quietly do more damage than Kennedy will do. But yeah, Hegseth and Gabbard, all Gabbard has to do is, make a phone call on a secure line and give away everything that is keeping us safe here. And then all these folks who said that they were voting for Trump because he would keep us out of war can find out what it's like to have the war come to us. That is my deepest fear.
You gotta really wonder about her because she does parrot the Russian line sometimes, and it sure seems like the happiest person in the world right now is Vladimir Putin, waiting to see the American government collapse on itself with these appointees.
It's very scary. I don't know if the system can hold Tulsi Gabbard. I mean, we'll talk about Tulsi in a minute. I'm getting signals from Lady B. Hang on, because we budgeted a lot of time because this is like a mammoth-sized train wreck that we're about to experience when the former president becomes the president. 332 WCPT, Joan Esposito show, live, local, and progressive.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, radio personality and author Turi Ryder.
3:35 I'll make that 3:34 if you're particular. Or just look at your phone. WCPT Live, Local, and Progressive. I'm Turi Ryder. Joining me again in a moment, Professor David Levine of the University of California, San Francisco's law school. He's a big legal deal, but he's fun. So much fun. Now, tomorrow, it's going to be a best of for Choose Views, but look ahead to Friday morning, and you will have Karen Byrne of the True Blue Politics podcast from 6 to 8 in the morning on WCPT. David, where did I leave you here? I know I just lost my train of thought altogether.
HHS. All the people who are getting appointed at the second level in Health and Human Services. The person who running National Institute of Health, who has his issues about what we should have done about COVID.
Yeah. I would could I just suggest that if that guy, that Stanford professor who doesn't even have a particular background, if that guy is going to be head of Health and Human Services, I just recommend that any doctor or healthcare professional who sees him, as a courtesy to show how appreciative they are of all he's done for America, remove their masks. If he has any kind of surgical procedure, just as a sign of respect to all the doctors, surgeons, nurses, anesthetists, and technical people, if he comes in and is about to be cut open, as you lean over him, let him know that you will be removing your mask as a gesture of respect. That
sounds about right.
Yeah.
Sounds about right. Yeah, it's all those people at the second level. And going back to that question of, will the Senate do its job? These are all appointments that need to be confirmed by the Senate. Those very people at that level are confirmed. It isn't just the cabinet officials. And so, again, it comes back to that question of, can you find 4 Republicans who would have the gumption to say no to the ones that are not only utterly unqualified, but really have the ability to do tremendous damage to a lot of people in a short period of time.
I mean, it really is something. Look at the damage that the former president did when he recommended, what is it, hydroxychloroquine.
Yeah.
I mean, people were showing up in the hospitals from this stuff. And all over, what's his name, who just got his podcast sold at auction to The Onion, whatever, paranoid Alex Jones, and he was recommending every kind of nut job vitamin pill. And people I care about who believe that this stuff are still sending me emails about, quote, close quote, vaccine injury. And to have one of these people in charge of one of these agencies really could get a lot of people killed. It was true last time, and it's true again. And when you hear Kennedy say, we just need to take a rest on these communicable diseases, as though you're just going to give up beer for Lent. I mean, it's ridiculous. But he can do it.
I don't know if you saw this, but I think it was the Wall Street Journal, an article saying that they're already figuring out stock market plays as to what's going to go up and what's going to go down because of their policies. And one of the ones you might not have thought of is that apparently there's a dental supply company whose stock is doing extremely well now because of the assumption that if Robert Kennedy gets localities to stop using fluoride in the water, then dentists are going to have a lot more work to do filling cavities that otherwise are unnecessary.
Well, there's
money to be made with these policies.
It'll take a little while for that to happen, but it's true. I mean, I have to tell you as an aside, I have a very dear friend who has some quirky views, and she's no longer with this guy, but I hated him the minute he showed up at my house because he petted my dog in a way she didn't like, and I told him to stop, and he did it anyhow. So right there, I wanted to throw him out the second-story window. But he launched into some anti-fluoride diatribe, and then he smiled, and his teeth looked like he'd never brushed them in his whole life. And I just thought,
oh, God.
How could you, you should pardon the expression, with a straight face, it's amazing. And this kind of faux science is all over the place. That reminds me of what I wanted to ask you. The impoundment that Donald Trump swore he had nothing to do with the Make America whatever.
Right. Project 2025.
And the other one, the Make America Great Institute, which was people who'd already been in his orbit who wanted a plan when they got back in his orbit. Could he just decide, if they get impoundment through, that he, for example, doesn't want to fund the CIA or doesn't want to fund the FBI? Could he just say, you know what, they gave you this money to run your department, but no?
Well, that's what presidents from time to time have wanted to do, and the law is quite clear. The answer is no, as long as Congress appropriates the money. Now, sometimes there's loopholes about sometimes you can move money around a little bit for certain purposes, but something as big as let's not fund the CIA, I think the answer is no. The president could not do that unilaterally, but you could make life kind of miserable for agents. You could encourage retirements. I mean, one of the tricks they did with, I forget which department it was, where they moved something out of Washington to Kansas, and as a result, about 2/3 of the employees said, "Forget it, I'm out of here. I'm not going to go with the agency. My kids are in school and all the rest." So there are ways to kill programs by 1,000 cuts without being so gross as to say, I'm simply not going to allow this money to go forward. There's more devious ways to get there.
You've just put a big spotlight on something that Elon Musk would probably love. He wants to shrink government. He can move it to Topeka, and it's already happening or about to happen. One of our family members works as a government employee for the Center for Medicare Medicaid Services. And as you know, Elon Musk is requiring everyone to show up to work full time, 5 days a week. Of course, Elon Musk can go flitting around at the World Wrestling Extreme Martial Arts, whatever it is, thing that he goes to, or to watch one of his rockets knock birds' nests out of the trees in Texas. But people who were going into work, for example, even in a D.C. office, are about to be told they have to go 5 days a week to Baltimore. And at least in the case of the family member that I know, the head of the department has a very serious physical disability, and he finds California more accessible for someone with his series of physical disabilities. If they make that department head go to Baltimore, a city that is not notorious for its wheelchair accessibility, he might very well do exactly what you're saying. So what if you want to shrink government, if you get these people to quit, what are you required to do about hiring new people?
Well, that goes back in part to this question of what, I don't know if you've heard the phrase Schedule F, and what one of the Project 2025 goals is to politicize more of the positions in the federal government. Because if you think of it, the very, very top layer is meant to be political, and that when you get a new president from a new party with new ideas, the president needs to be able to appoint those top people to provide guidance to the agencies. But down below that are government employees who are career people, who are meant to be nonpartisan. I would include my brother in this. My brother works for the National Institute of Science and Technology, and so that he's many layers below the political side. But if you hear the phrase Schedule F, what that means is trying to declare more and more federal employees as political appointees, so that then you could more easily say, all right, new administration, I'm going to demand your resignation, and then I'm going to put in my true believers into those spots. So the minute you get somebody to quit, you can fill that, no matter where on the food chain they are, with a Schedule F employee. They're not going to have protections if you're the one who put them there? Not nowhere in the hierarchy, but let's say, if you think of it as it's a pyramid, right? And at the very, very top are without a question, the political employees. But if you go further down the pyramid where it's a little wider, let's go midway down the pyramid. It would be those people that Schedule F would then cover. People who previously had been considered career people, a GS-15, let's say, a very professional person, but not at the very, very highest level.
But I want to be clear that I understand this. You can decide that a GS-15 position, all by yourself, as you, the political appointee heading the department, you can decide this is no longer someone who has to take a civil service exam or be, again, any experience. You can just fill this with a political appointee, and you, head of agency, can be the one who decides this. So if I understand you correctly, if the head of the department, say Kennedy, decides to move everybody to, I don't know, Sacramento, California, and everybody quits, or a bunch of people quit, instead of replacing those people with the appropriate government level employees, they can arbitrarily decide to make those positions political if they want to, and they're allowed to do that?
By executive order. So the first step would be the president would use an executive order to basically say these positions are now hereby declared to be under Schedule F to be political. Now, there are people who are in unions. This would not apply to them. There's, certain levels of the government. I don't think it would apply to a huge amount of the Defense Department. Think of your line soldiers, that sort of thing. It wouldn't apply. But I'm thinking sort of the mid-level people, not people with titles like the Undersecretary of State, but let's go 3 levels below somebody like that, something that has been considered to be a non-political career position and something that you are insulated from politics, your personal views are immaterial, and that's where our tremendous expertise lies in the government, where this is why things get done. This is why we can predict where hurricanes are going.
Oh, yeah. And know where on the map they actually are. So could there be...
Exactly.
Yeah, and take your Sharpie. Could there be... And that, by the way, you've just put your finger on a department that's very vulnerable, because NOAA and the national atmospheric agencies, they are generating a lot of data on the harms being done environmentally by some of Trump's big buddies and their companies and the drill baby drill contingent. So if he eviscerates those departments, the people who voted for him, who are being flooded out and burned out, the people running those agencies will have no idea how that happened or why that happened, or Donald Trump can wander around with a rake going, we need to rake the forest floor. And everybody in the agencies who used to laugh at him will go, yes, sir, that's absolutely right. And we all have rakes right next to our desks. That could happen from what you're saying. So will there be...
At a level of the government, yes, at a level. So I'm thinking of it as layers of the government, and we would be going down more layers.
So who decides how, like the limbo, who decides how low you can go, and will there be a court effort to resolve this in some meaningful, protective way for people who actually have expertise?
Right. In the first instance, it would be the president issuing an executive order saying that people who have certain kinds of jobs are now declared to be political jobs. Then lawsuits might come back to say, no, you can't do that. The obvious example is people who are represented in unions. But a lot of these people, again, I'm thinking my brother, a PhD from an Ivy League school, very, very involved scientist, utterly uninterested in the politics, to declare that position to be a political position and to say it no longer is a matter of your expertise, how many publications do you have, what do you know about part of his work has to do with improving detection of cancers, rather than what do you know about that, but rather how loyal are you to the president, so that we're at risk of losing a lot of expertise. But
so
it's a combination.
If you're not in a union, there's going to be a court case. You're thinking.
I think that, if you're in a union, then you'd have greater protection. It would depend on how far-reaching the exact executive order said, but at that middle level, I'm thinking this middle level.
I got it. I got the middle level. I'm just trying to narrow it down to see.
It could be hard. I think it would be hard for those people to challenge that. It would depend on the exact terms of their contracts, whether or not that can be changed. A lot of it is custom and expectation, as opposed to, let's say, statutorily granted right.
Got it. Okay, we're going to take a moment and then talk some more. WCPT live, local, and progressive. I'm Turi Ryder, and we are with David Levine, UC San Francisco Law. I can never get the new name right. Professor. and he is going to be back with us in a moment. Listen live weekdays from 2 to 5 for Joan's show every weekday. And if you can't get it on your radio, if you're in your office or at work, try TuneIn at heartlandsignal.com or just tell Alexa to play WCPT from TuneIn. WCPT, live, local, progressive.
WCPT replay.
We're blessed to have our wonderful Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton with us this morning.
People have to understand the work that we have been able to do here in Illinois under Governor Pritzker's leadership and with our partners in the General Assembly is we have been able to put things in place, policies and laws, so that no matter who ended up in the White House this term, we would have protections here in Illinois. When I look at what we've done to protect reproductive freedom here in Illinois and enshrine the right to reproductive care, abortion care, what we've done to protect LGBTQ plus rights right here in Illinois, what we've done to protect workers' rights, the Workers' Rights Amendment, we raised the minimum wage, and so many other things. These are the progressive values that we have been able to make real progress on here in Illinois.
Keep listening to WCPT 820 because facts matter.
Alexa, play WCPT.
WCPT from TuneIn.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, radio personality and author Turi Ryder.
Yes, if you can spell it, you can find me all over the place. Podcasts, books, all kinds of stuff, socials. Turi, T-U-R-I, Ryder, like the rental truck. With us still, Professor David Levine, brilliant author of many, many legal tomes and opinions, and also a lot of fun on the radio. So, David.
Yes.
What should people be doing if we are worried and wish to defend ourselves, or should we just let it roll and go, okay, you voted for him. You get what you get, as they say in preschool, and you don't get upset?
Well, I think to the extent you can prepare, the different people have better ways to do that. I think one is just the ordinary person. I think giving money to organizations that are prepared to fight back is a very good use of your money. I don't know if Governor Pritzker is doing this, but I know that Governor Newsom has called the California legislature back into session, and one of the reasons is to start to buttress the legal defenses of the state so that when and if they have to start suing, that they will have the money to put together the lawsuits that are necessary to try and stymie some of the more outrageous things that the Project 2025 folks might try to do, and so that's where you can get ready. I think reading Timothy Snyder's books about tyranny is a good place to go. And one of his lessons is don't give up ahead of time. Don't just assume something's going to happen, but be ready to stand up when you need to stand up.
Yeah, if you can write a check, you write a check. I think a lot of people are worried about Pam Bondi, and I weirdly am not so worried about Pam Bondi. Who's right? Pam Bondi, by the way, she is the replacement nominee for Matt Gaetz, and she was the Attorney General of Florida. And I think she's probably as good as we're going to get, but what do you think?
Well, I think that's probably true. I think, look, on paper, she is clearly qualified, having spent 8 years as Attorney General of Florida, having spent some time before that as Secretary of State. First I ever heard her name, she was in the state government during Bush versus Gore in Florida. So on paper, she has qualifications that a Matt Gaetz does not have, for sure. It's the question of will she institutionally be able to make the turn, and when she holds up her hand to take an oath to the Constitution of the United States, it is not an oath to Donald J. Trump. She's been one of his lawyers. Can she make the turn? And I think it's 4 people who have been appointed under her, all of whom have been Trump's personal lawyers. And I think it also is important whether they will be able to make the turn. At least I think 1 or 2 of them were in the Justice Department before, so they understand what the right mission is. Will they be able to make that distinction? So we'll see with Pam Bondi and the other 3 or 4, the Solicitor General designate, the the Deputy Attorney General, and these other really super important jobs.
I haven't kept track, but there are two people I was really worried about. One is that nut job professor out of California who lost, the one who was told you better get a good lawyer, the one who tried to tell Trump that the vice president could stop the vote count.
John Eastman.
Eastman, right.
And then Clark. Clark is the other one. Jeffrey Clark.
Who's the one who showed up and said, just make me the attorney general and I'll do whatever you want? And all of the people in the room on January 6th said that's a terrible idea. Are either of those two people, that was Clark?
Yeah.
Are
Clark.
either of those people being appointed? I'm sorry?
Yeah, I haven't seen his name surface, but I wouldn't be surprised. And by the way, going back to Chief Justice Roberts and the immunity decision, Jack Smith had changed the theory of the indictment in the January 6th case because all of Mr. Trump's conversations with Mr. Clark then became off limits, because that was within the official channels of communication, because Clark was running something like the Natural Resources Division of the Justice Department when he put up his hand saying, pick me, pick me. But that all was official conduct, and that was completely off limits. So I don't know whether we're going to see him come back or not, but it wouldn't be surprising, let's say.
Oh, boy. And while we're predicting, I've had people say to me, Eileen Luce Cannon, the judge in Florida who decided that Jack Smith was not legitimately appointed, someone has been suggesting that she will be appointed to a higher position, a much higher position. Is that even reasonable?
I do think that's within the realm of possibility. I think a promotion to the 11th Circuit, which covers Florida and a couple other states, is the most likely thing, because that's something that, again, I think the Republican-controlled Senate might be inclined to pat her on the head on that. And actually, her credentials are better suited to the 11th Circuit because her work in the Justice Department before she became a judge was as an appellate lawyer. So I wouldn't be at all surprised with that. Now, if you're looking at Supreme Court, at the people auditioning to be Supreme Court justice, if Alito and or Thomas decide to step away at this point, you want to look to people who have clerked for Alito or Thomas and are in their 40s or early 50s and who are federal judges right now. And there's a handful of them out there who you can just see them writing separate opinions saying, pick me, pick me.
Oh, boy.
So I think Cannon is more likely to go to the 11th Circuit, but there are some of these others. So it would be sort of a little sweetener for Thomas or Alito, just as they did with Justice Kennedy. Gorsuch and Kavanaugh were Kennedy clerks, and that was part of the sweetener to get Kennedy to retire. Is his own clerk replaced him, and actually Breyer, same thing happened with Breyer. Kennedy Jackson was his clerk, but I would not be at all surprised. So if you want to bet, you take a bet on exactly that category. Former Thomas and Alito clerks, 40 to 50 years old, currently sitting on federal courts, and there's a bunch of them out there.
I think you meant to say.
That's your minor league bet.
I think you meant to say Ketanji Brown Jackson. Is that who you meant to say?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's
who was Breyer's clerk.
Right.
Who's brilliant.
Yeah,
I love her.
She's remarkable.
She's brilliant, but it happens that she fits that mold of a former clerk of the retiring justice.
Well,
getting the nod, but she is super, super qualified. She's one of the best appointments in years.
I'm very happy, and I'm also sad that I now have to pray for the well-being of both Alito and Thomas. That is, that's a sad one for me. And when I sit down and I think, who do I most hope lives long, it's now Alito and Thomas. Probably only my immediate family members have more of my concern for their health at this moment. Professor Levine, David, thank you so much for being with us. We'll talk again soon. Thank you, and to you.
We'll talk.
It's a minute before 4 o'clock, WCPT, live, local, and progressive.
The Thom Hartmann radio program provides all of the intelligence, information, and insight you'll need to win the water cooler wars. Weekdays 11 to 2 right here on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, radio personality and author Turi Ryder.
It is a pleasure to be here for Joan. Joan comes back next week. If you need a little more of Joan, you can certainly hear the Best of show tomorrow, or you can find Joan and this show today and all of the shows that happen during Joan's time slot with the new podcast. 2 podcasts, really. Joan Esposito, Live, Local, and Progressive, and Joan Esposito full episodes, along with featured interviews. Just subscribe to one or both. It's available on all the usual suspect podcast channels, or search Joan's show page by visiting heartlandsignal.com. Patty Vasquez also got about an hour till she gets here to drive you home. She'll be joined by guest co-host Dwayne Kennedy and Warren Price and Tom Appel. Tom's the car guy who knows things. He knows things. I am bringing you now a guy who also knows things about cars. Not necessarily how they work, but how to work in them. James Van Ostall is a Chicago air personality and the host of I can't even say it. What's the matter with me, James? You want to say it? Carne?
Carcone Carne.
Oh, yes. My gosh. If I can't say it, I can still listen to
week.
it.
You're off the hook. It's a holiday week.
You can still listen to Carcone Carne by finding it on any of the usual podcast suspect networks. But I especially wanted to bring James in today because a lot of us are going to be locked in our cars for a really long time with people we may or may not know all that well, or perhaps know better than we wish we did. And describe your podcast and how that works when you lock yourself in a car with the people that you lock yourself in a car with. Go.
You make it sound very menacing. It's not. So I've been doing this podcast for going on 11 years. Essentially, I go to restaurants, brew pubs, locations of note across the city and suburbs. I record in my parked car with a guest. More likely than not, it's a musical guest. And we usually eat and talk in my parked car, and that's where I record the podcast.
And you sometimes have political figures. I remember you had Christian Picciolini, the reformed...
Christian Picciolini.
Right.
Yeah, the former skinhead, who turned everything around.
Right.
I would love to have more politicians. As you, I'm sure, are aware, that's a hard road to go down. It's hard to get guests like that. I had Paul Vallis before the Chicago mayoral contest. I'm very interested in doing that. It's hard, as a one-person operation, it's hard to do the guest booking for that.
I would imagine. I mean, when we put this show together, when I fill in or when Joan is here, we have the amazing Julia Shu who does a lot of that work for us. Is there anything when you lock yourself in a car with somebody or a group or a band where you think, I've heard these people's music, they're kind of wild, they're kind of out of control. What are they going to be like in my car? Or do you just not worry about that at all?
I don't worry about it. I kind of hope that things aren't straight and narrow. I kind of hope for things to take a weird turn because unlike being on the radio, which I was for many years in Chicago, I can kind of be out there and take chances. And sometimes those left turns and weird tangential things are awesome to hear in the finished product.
So what are some of the more unexpected things that have happened as you lock yourself? I remember I watched one of them because these are on YouTube. It's Carcone Carne, and you can just find it on YouTube. But you had a group, I can't remember which band, and the food was too spicy for them, and they were just sort of losing it. Yes, they were losing their minds because their faces were burning up. What are some of the unexpected moments that happen, and have you got like first aid in the car, like yogurt in case somebody's mouth blows off their face, or what do you do about that?
Well, you just have a bandolier filled with EpiPens ready to go in case of allergic reaction, something like that.
Do you? Not yet.
Not yet. I wouldn't say there are that many unexpected things. One thing I've been trying to do more of, and it's hard to do, when I have musicians on, I try to have them perform in the car, which is bananas to try and put together with my limited audio resources. But
now you have to tell them. Now you have to tell them this is not a car. Tell them what car this is. It's
well,
not.
It's
huge.
a Mazda 3. This is not a Range Rover. This is a Mazda 3, a 2012 Mazda 3. It's seen some stuff. I kind of think the car's in hospice at this point. It's at 160,000 miles. I don't have a lot of time left with this car, so people in the back seat get kneecapped. It's profoundly uncomfortable for them. But I think that puts a little edge on everything and makes it kind of interesting.
Do the bands fight over who gets to sit in the front seat and who gets to sit in the back?
Well, that's a whole political thing, really. I try to make, because this is on video, as you mentioned, on YouTube and also on Facebook, optics are important. So I'm very aware that, I don't want to always have like two white dudes sitting in the front seat and there's, a person of color in the back seat. I try to make it very, very respectful. And I don't like to put women in the back seat. I try to make sure that if there's a woman in the group, she's sitting in the front seat with me. It's a really careful balancing act.
I wouldn't have thought of that, but now you're making me think of it. Do you tell your folks you're going to get hot wing sauce all over yourself, wear a bib, or don't wear something with a lot of cleavage because you're going to get crumbs right down the front? And what do you tell them?
Well, okay, you just took me in an interesting direction. Something I've learned from this podcast, some unexpected thing, Turi, the use of exam gloves when eating things like hot wings. This was introduced to me by Louis Mendocino, who owns Cobra Lounge over by Lake Street. We had wings, and he brought a box of exam gloves, and his reasoning
did it
which was
scare
very
you?
sound.
Wait, when you first came with the box of exam gloves, did you have a moment where your heart just briefly skipped a beat, or were you just you were okay?
It wasn't expected. It was a little weird.
Okay.
But when you think about it, it's kind of brilliant, because who hasn't eaten wings and needed to hose off afterward? If you have the exam gloves, you go right in, you get messy, and then the second you're done, you roll them off your hand, you throw them in the garbage, you're good. And I like the idea so much that a couple weeks ago I had Ryan Argast from Marina City. He was on The Voice this year. We recorded at Johnny's Beef over in Elmwood Park, which of course is magnificent. And those beef sandwiches, when they're baptized, I mean, they drip down your forearm. I'm like, I'm going to bring back the exam gloves. And that's just a pro tip for your audience. I think Joan Esposito would love to hear about this down the road.
I'm sure.
It's a clean and wonderful way to eat really messy stuff, especially in a car.
Now you've brought it up, the whole clean thing. And so two questions. What on earth has befallen your car, and how do you keep it clean-ish? And how do people complain that they don't want to talk to you because they're busy chewing, or do they talk with their mouths open, or how does that happen?
There are moments when people are chewing on microphone, myself included. I kind of got over that hang up a while ago, but it does happen. So it's not like an AMSR sort of thing. It's not a soothing sound necessarily. But as far as the cleanliness goes... Okay,
go ahead and tell people you have to tell people what an AMSR is, so that not everybody knows about the soft sounds of AMSR. Go ahead, tell them.
Yeah, I'm not even sure I understand it completely, but it became a thing a couple years ago. People would make soothing sounds like low vocal noises and whispery noises that were supposed to bring calm and peace to people. I don't understand it.
I can tell you a little bit about it. First of all, it's definitely creepy, okay? And I know that people are going to say, I have a disability. You just made fun of my disability. You know what? Jam it. I don't care. It's creepy. There are people... Well, I can say what I want, as long as, So there are people who like to hear like the sound of your down jacket, that zipper going up and down. And there are people who like to hear the sound of like feather rubbing on a microphone. And again, creepy. But they find this soothing and relaxing. And there are people all over YouTube who make money creating these sounds for people. And I imagine that some people are relaxing in entirely different ways that we would prefer not to discuss on the radio. But there are probably psychologists listening right now who are busily dialing this radio station going, it's a real thing. It's a real thing. Personally, I think if you've gotten along all these years without having to play on YouTube the sound of somebody zipping and unzipping their down jacket, that you can get along a little bit longer without it. But that's just me. So yeah, that's not what this is. You hear people chewing. What about looking at people chewing? Because that is not a pleasant sight.
That's not necessarily something that you can zero in on, or it's not really a big part of what. At the end of the day, this is an interview show. It's me interviewing people, and the food is just something to help move things along. I mean, as a radio host, when you get someone in a studio and you put headphones on them and you're in that room with the bright lights, it puts them in a different frame of mind. It's harder, I think, at times to disarm them or get them to be more authentic. I think in this scenario, we're sitting in a car, we're eating wings or pizza, and we're just talking. It puts the guests at ease. So the food is just an excuse to loosen people up more than anything.
Well, next time, as long as the car is parked, you can have cars con beverages, adult beverages. That would probably...
I've actually researched that. You can't do that in the parked car. I've thought about that.
Okay.
So I've got to do stuff like on location, like a bar con carne sort of thing.
Bar con carne rhymes. Okay. Well, you've just lured me into it. I'm going to give you a few moments to think this over. But when you said that people are relaxed and they reveal themselves in ways they might not otherwise, in a moment you're going to tell me some things that people have told you where you thought to yourself, I cannot believe you just told me that. It's coming up 4:16. You're listening to James Van Osdol, host of the very popular, just did its 1000th installment podcast, Car Con Carne. And we'll be back with him on WCPT in moments. It's 4:16.
Tom Hartman.
Lori in Ocala, Florida. Hey, Lori, what's up?
Hi, Tom. First, I just want to say thank you for being here for all of us. It's really important. It's almost like having a friend there that you know you can listen to and talk to. And I've listened to you since Air America, and I really appreciate you today.
Well, thank you, Lori.
The Tom Hartman Radio Program. Weekdays 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. on WCPT 820, where facts matter. Because facts matter. You're listening to WCPT 820.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, radio personality and author Turi Ryder.
As you make your way to whatever festive location you are headed towards, it's 4:17. I'm Turi Ryder, in for Joan. And tomorrow we get best ofs. And then Friday, William Muck will be filling in this very chair for Joan. And among his guests will be the political scientist John Shaw of Southern Illinois University at Carbondale. I've heard him speak. He's interesting. So you will get a chance to dissect a little more politics, perhaps a little more reverence than you get around here. James Van Osdol, an air personality of whose work I have been fond for a while, just did his 1000th Car Con Carne podcast, and we have him in to talk about those long car trips and things you learn about people other than what their tolerance for 100 bottles of beer on the wall happens to be. What are some of the things, because you usually have bands, up and coming bands, you can really, be fascinated by a new artist on the basis of who they are once they've ridden or parked in your car with you. What are some of the things you've learned about people where you just thought, I didn't see that coming?
I don't know if I've had as many of those moments because, like you said, I do have a lot of up-and-coming bands. Occasionally I'll have a bigger name, and those are great, but it really, for me, is a lot of those up-and-comers. You talked about Christian Picciolini, former skinhead, who did some absolutely vile things in his childhood. I mean, him talking about the levels of violence he committed and the horrible things, the horrible racial attacks he helped lead back in the fact that he was as forthright and candid about that was amazing. Thinking about local bands, there's a wonderful post-punk band from Chicago called Juna, DJUNAH, and Donna Diane, the lead singer, posted something on social media about really scary suicidal ideations, and I had her on shortly after that to talk about that, and she was very candid about having CPTSD and talking about wrestling with the thoughts of killing oneself. And it was the kind of thing where you just hold your breath and listen and just applaud someone for being courageous enough to say that stuff on a microphone.
I know what PTSD is, but what is CPTSD? I don't know.
I knew you were going to ask that, Turi Ryder. It's something worse. It's a more extreme level of trauma, and I'm certainly not qualified to answer that. But when Donna explained this was a few years ago, it was pretty heavy.
So it stands for worse, basically.
Yes.
Okay, got it. So, and she was really forthright about her struggles with her mental health right there in your car on Car Con Carne. Do you hear back from people once they've watched or listened to the podcasts about the impact that it's made on them?
Not in that high-minded kind of way. I mean, I think what it comes down to, this is a very hyper-local podcast. I mean, this is very Chicago and suburban.
I love it. If you can't get out to hear a band or don't know who to find their own music online, this helps you find it, right?
Well, I hope so. I mean, it's weird. In the world of podcasting, there hasn't been a whole lot of push to do things on the local level. Everyone tries to aim national. And for me, what I hear back from people, to answer your question, is I think it's cool that someone is in our communities, is going to Lisle, is going to McHenry, is going to DeKalb to record stuff. And that's what I'm doing. So that's what I hear back. People just grateful that they're hearing their communities reflected in some media adjacent way.
That's a great feeling. I mean, one of my very first radio jobs, I was on the Fox, which was a progressive station in Elgin. And it was lovely to go and MC a smaller show and meet the band and even people who became huge national acts. We had Al Jorgensen of Ministry come to the studio, and he was scary, may I just say. He's a scary guy.
He's also scary smart, too. He's an interesting dude.
Well, he was. I don't think is he still living? I don't think so.
Oh, yes, he is. Yes, he is.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, God.
100%. Yes.
Oh, my God. He scared me so badly. Anyway, I'm glad he's doing all right. Is he doing all right?
He's doing all right.
Oh, good. Okay. And as you can see, I'm way out of the music loop now these days. I'm so far out of the music loop that stuff that my kids listen to, I'm like, who's that? Who's that? And their usual answer is, I can't believe you don't know. You got a wall of records here. And what happened to you? Do you feel like doing the podcast keeps you connected, not just to local scenes, but to the music itself? And if so, what should we be, what's coming? What awaits us? What, now that we have, and music is often political and often moves the political dial. What is the meeting point, the intersection right now between the music that people are making and what's happening in the world beyond?
It's interesting, and you're absolutely right. I think one thing we lose as we get older is reliable curation of music. Like, none of us want to stop hearing about or getting energized by new music. It's harder to find what that music is, and I hope my podcast helps with that. I mean, to answer your question about something that perhaps WCPT listeners might like, there's a guy who's been making music in the Chicago area for decades. His name is Ike Riley. He's Libertyville-based, has been Libertyville-based his entire life. Writes a lot of political stuff, a lot of personal, quirky stuff. There's a new documentary out about him that Tom Morello of Rage Against the Machine produced called Don't Turn Your Back on Friday Night. Tells the story of Ike. He just released a new single. I think he's no spring chicken. He's been around the block, but I think because of that, his lyrics are really insightful and interesting, and like I said, sometimes political. And I think he's one of the best lyricists in the Chicago area, and that might be something worth chasing.
Huh. Okay. And are you working a lot with videographers now and other music documentarians to say, are you recommending groups in particular to people who may get them heard on a wider level, or is the podcast doing all of that work?
I hope the podcast. No one's reaching out to me. You're the first person to ask, at least in a while.
No.
I hope that the podcast helps, light a fuse for someone, or spark some interest over a band. But I don't have documentarians reaching out saying, "Hey, who can I chronicle?" I hope the podcast is doing what I've set out for it to do.
Well, it certainly is a really great introduction to some of the personalities who are making music in and around. And you travel, as you pointed out. You go to Lisle. You go. How far afield do I don't go to Lisle. How far afield do you go to record artists, and what is the boundary of local in your mind?
Yeah, I mentioned DeKalb. That was the farthest I've ever done. I did that once. That was a little extreme. I mean, usually I kind of look at Joliet to McHenry as the boundary, north to south, and maybe Elgin west.
Yeah, and of course, when you hit the lakefront, you get a get out of jail free card. You don't have to go east.
Exactly right.
Right. Is anybody offering to underwrite your next vehicle? Has anybody gotten into the vehicle and said, this is just disgusting. Here's $100 towards your next new car? And
oh my goodness, wouldn't that be lovely?
Well, there's always
time.
GoFundMe. I think you should start now. I mean, you said yourself, look, my new car has 205,000 miles on it. My old car is a 1986. So
That's amazing.
What's a Supra? They don't make those like that anymore. I have to say that, your car, as you pointed out, sort of, it's almost like an extension of your own persona. And my car is an extension of the persona I used to have, where I was like young, little, hot, cute, and they wouldn't even let me drive it because they said girls didn't buy those cars. So that car is my flying middle finger at the entire sports car sales industry circa 1986. And I'm trying to afford extra. In my case, the fundraising will be for extra funeral plots so that I can be buried in it. And one kid said to me once, this car is old. And I said, don't worry, you're never going to get your hands on it. No problem.
So it'll be like Willie the Whip in his Cadillac coffin.
I might very well. It might be me. Mm-hmm. So what is, you've done your 1,000th. What are you going to continue as you have, or is there a different goal? A turn? You should pardon the automotive metaphor. A turn in the road. What is it going to be? Musicians who are charging your new EV while they eat with the other hand. What will it be? Coming up.
Yeah, full speed ahead. I'm talking to Sarah Jean Stevens, who's an Americana artist based out of Crystal Lake. I'm going to have her on next week. David Singer, who's performing at the Hideout on the 14th of December. I have him set up for this coming Monday. Full speed, same as it was. If it ain't broke, I love doing this, and I'm going to keep on doing it.
And the days go by, water flowing under rock. That's the same as it. Absolutely. Any other notes about clubs that we don't know about that we should be checking out, or bands that have really impressed you that we, of all, I realize it's hard. It's like asking people to pick their favorite this or that, but anything that has come across your dashboard where you think that this is one that really I'd love to stand on a mountain and yell about?
There are a lot, and you're right. And I as a rule, I don't like singling out local bands because I've been involved with local music so long. I just don't like picking one over others. But I put artists. The beauty of a podcast, as opposed to doing music radio, as I did for many years, the people I interview are people who I find interesting. So if I'm talking to them, something about them appeal to me musically, creatively. So those are my recommendations.
Has there
every episode.
Has there ever been one where you went, forget it. This is going in the trash. I am not using this. I was bored.
Yes.
Silly.
I had a couple of those. A couple of live ones where my guests were perhaps a little too in the bag, a little too under the influence, and they thought they were much more interesting than they were, and it was I was embarrassed for them, and those episodes no longer, you can look everywhere, they no longer exist on the internet. I did that as a courtesy to them.
Good. Make sure that if your mom listened, it wouldn't be too awful. And clubs, any cool clubs that we might be looking at where these folks are playing who, everybody knows Fitzgerald's and everybody knows the usual suspects, but there may be...
I hope everyone knows Fitzgerald's. I was just there for Chris Green Quartet. There's such a wonderful place to see live music. This city has so many clubs, and I feel like new venues are popping up all the time. I love all the old favorites. I love Metro. I love Beat Kitchen. I love Subterranean. I love Lincoln Hall. We are absolutely blessed in this town to have all these wonderful small-sized venues where you can really get up close and be part of something.
And my last question for you, when you go to these small clubs, at our age, do you or do you not wear earplugs?
I don't, and I know that's the wrong answer.
No, there is no wrong answer. There's just your answer. James Van Osdal, congratulations on hitting 1,000. That's a lot of podcasts. That's a lot of dripping wings and exam gloves.
Yes.
And I will keep watching and listening, and we'll talk maybe even before your next 1,000th episode. Thank you so much. That was James Van Osdal. You can hear his podcast, Car Con Carne. You can see it on YouTube. And if you want to know who's coming to you, who's coming down, to borrow the automotive metaphor, the automotive expressway to your heart, check it out. It's 430 WCPT.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, radio personality and author Turi Ryder.
Why, yes, I am with Lady B at the controls. And thanks again to Mark and Matt and Julia for making this all possible. Patty is going to be in to drive you home. Yeah, she could have said I'm taking the day before Thanksgiving off, but she didn't. Because she loves you and because she's going to get to talk to Tom Appel, among many other folks, starting a little after 5. Now, speaking of people you talk to, we're going to spend a little time discussing the season of the phone scam. But you should feel free to text me phone scams you have outwitted or actually fallen for by texting right now at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. That'll get you in. I can read your text on the air, and we are going to meet together Mr. Nathan Nash, staff attorney in the FTC's Midwest region, because this is the season. 'Tis the season to be phone scammed. Correct, Mr. Nash?
That's correct. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Does everybody up their phone scamming game at this time of year? That is what I've been given to understand.
Yes, that's definitely correct. I think with all the holiday shopping, that's a common area of phone scams. People send fake delivery notifications, fake advertisements with links, and once folks click on those links, it's off to the races.
Yes. So your general, if you had to give one overarching piece of advice, it would be, I'm sure I can guess, but say it anyway.
Well, I would say be vigilant. If you get something out of the blue, whether it's a text, an email, a phone call, don't immediately trust the link or send money. Please verify. Go to the company's website that the text or message reports to be from. Do your own research before you send anything, and please don't send anything by cryptocurrency or wire transfer or anything like that without verifying.
See, that's a lot of things. I would just say if someone sends it to you, don't answer it and don't click on it.
That's more, yes.
Yeah, don't answer, don't click. Don't click, don't answer. But I heard a piece on the BBC the other day where someone has created an AI time waster to keep phone scammers busy so that because this was genius, I thought. The more time that a phone scammer wastes not moving their scam along, the more expensive it is for the scam operator. Are you familiar with this time-wasting technique?
I am not. That sounds really interesting, and I would love to read more about it.
Well, I can give you my impersonation of it in a moment. I can give it to you. It was hilarious. They call the AI character Daisy, and you hear her say things like, "Oh, just a minute, dear. I have to adjust my computer screen. It's loading very slowly. Oh, I think it's gone dark. One moment." And she keeps this up, and the guy on the other end of the phone presumably is trying her move along, and she says things like, "Can you tell me the name of my bank? I'm afraid I've forgotten it." And they're like, "Look it up," but they have to be nice. And tell me about where these scams are originating, and because they're businesses, right? Tell me about the back office there of your average phone scam.
Yeah, it can be businesses, it can be individuals, it can really be anyone. And that's great to know. I mean, AI can be a really useful tool for consumers to protect themselves. It can also be a tool for scammers to turbocharge their scam and use voice cloning technology and other things to hoodwink people. But yeah, it can be businesses stateside in boiler rooms, or they can be overseas in boiler rooms and get into the country. So they can really be anywhere and everywhere.
It is dismaying when you can't get your own good connection to have somebody in Nigeria able to call you like they're across the street. That is annoying. Where are most of these large-scale scams operating? I'm guessing not from the States. I'm guessing from other countries. Which ones?
Yeah, I think it's hard to say that there's one country. I mean, it's really everyone who wants to get involved does. We've seen scams pretty much from every country on the map, and some of them are stateside. But I think you're right. It's not. There are quite a few that come from overseas.
And of course, once you've sent them your wire transfer or your crypto, you can't get that back. And I would think that the crypto thing is harder for them to work with because the people they typically scam may not be wired into crypto. But that's based on a whole bunch of assumptions. Who's falling for these scams?
It, again, can really just be anyone and everyone. I think scammers are getting more and more convincing at imitating, legitimate companies. And, during the holiday season when people are very busy, you don't necessarily have the time and you just click the link because you're expecting a package and suddenly, you're inputting personal information. And you're right, it's not just crypto. It can be gift cards. It can be wire transfers, money orders. There's a whole variety of ways people can get money, and it's really hard to get back.
So what is the typical script when you answer? First of all, if you answer a phone from a number you don't know, that right there. On the other hand, your doctor's office is probably calling from a number you don't know, and so is the person who, has the dry cleaning store. How much information should turn up on your screen before you answer a call?
Yes. I mean, it gets easier if your caller ID flags it as potential spam. That's always useful. An unknown number, yes, definitely approach with a degree of suspicion. I will say, unfortunately, scammers are getting better at spoofing legitimate numbers. So even if the number looks legitimate on your phone, you should verify. And the script they usually follow has some common elements. There's usually a sense of urgency. You have to act now, send us money now, or your accounts will be compromised, or you'll lose, your holiday package, or, you have to do it now to get a prize. So really just take the time and don't necessarily trust what you see on that caller ID screen.
Oh, I just got to say this right here, right now. There are no prizes. Just start life assuming that there are no prizes. If someone wants to give me a prize, they're basically going to have to rent a truck, back it up to my door, break a window, and throw it through, because I don't believe that there's any such thing as a prize, period, full stop. And with that, I've probably saved thousands. But, I don't care what valuable prize I've missed out on. There's no prize. Just forget it. But the post office, does the post office really, do they have that kind of personal service where if they can't deliver your package, they send you an email?
Very rarely. And, I would say usually it's a scam. So if you are expecting a package, usually you have the tracking information. So I would input that tracking information into the post office's website or, FedEx or UPS, rather than trusting a random email that comes with a link for you to click on.
So they'll give you a tracking number, and then you copy that tracking number and you go to the U.S. Postal Service or whatever it is and stick it in there and then see what happens.
Yeah, I would say in general, if someone sends a link, it's always better, instead of clicking on the link, just to go there yourself, using a route that because a link can look one way and actually take you somewhere you're not expecting, and the site can look like you think it would look, and you can put in information, and then, like I said, a scammer can get it, and it's awesome.
Right, so you start from scratch. You're like, I'm not clicking on your link that takes me to your fake post office site. I'm going to go to the actual U.S. Post Office website that is clear online, and I will start from scratch. This is one thing where starting from scratch, I think, you would agree, is probably the best, correct?
Yes, that's definitely right.
So we get lots of questions about where people are getting these numbers to scam you. Are they randomly generated, and how much do they know about you?
It can really, unfortunately, vary. Sometimes they are randomly generated. Sometimes folks are selling information to both legitimate and illegitimate companies. Unfortunately, there's a lot of data out there that's available for purchase. So, unfortunately, our information is out there in a lot of different ways.
So just giving somebody a little quiz doesn't necessarily make sure that you're really talking to someone who they represent themselves to be. But can you quiz somebody, and what should they know about you, and what will they probably not know about you?
I would. Yeah, that's. I would say it can vary. I think knowing the details about what you've ordered, if it's that kind of scam, or kind of personal details that wouldn't necessarily be available on just if you Google yourself, kind of the first things that come up, but more detailed and personal information. Although, again, I'd be careful about sharing personal information on one of these calls.
Well, no, you wouldn't want to correct them and say, no, actually, my kid's social security number is this. No, you wouldn't want to correct them. Do not help them. But exactly. I heard of one person who likes to waste their time with a different methodology. She quizzes them. Oh, really? I have a package. From whom? Where? And what is the address where they sent it? Maybe you have that wrong. Can you give me the address that you have? And she'll just waste their time. And at the end of it, she does something really interesting. She says, "You're a scammer." And then she hangs up. And what she said is, and I checked this out a little bit, if you express to them that you know that they're full of excrement, they may take your number off a list because is it true they sell lists to each other, different scammers? They have like a little club of scammer phone number sales. Is that true?
Yes, they definitely do sell lists to each other. These are kind of traded around. But yeah, that's an interesting. My personal approach is to hang up as soon as I think that someone's not legitimate. But
she has retired. She has time. Yeah, she's got time. She's entertaining herself. But yeah, they sell each other their lists. So do you get off the list once you bust them for that, or no?
You can. I mean, I think sometimes if one scammer stops calling you, it doesn't necessarily mean that your information still isn't out there for other scammers. So it might be kind of a game of whack-a-mole, but it doesn't hurt to try to get off as many lists as you can.
It also, I suppose, assumes that they have some ethics, and if someone's buying 1,000 numbers and they know that yours is not going to work, why would they care and make somebody's life easier? They might as well just sell it for the money they can get. Exactly. I have to ask you in a moment about some of your own ideas about, other than just not click, not answer. If you find yourself going down the road, what should you do? And we'll do that in just a second. It's 4:45. I'm Turi Ryder, in for Joan Esposito on WCPT Live Local Progressive.
Hey Google, play WCPT.
Streaming Chicago's Progressive Talk from TuneIn.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, radio personality and author Turi Ryder.
Oh, sweet.
4:47. I am Turi with you, Ryder like the truck, in for Joan. Thank you for being with me this afternoon, and thanks, Nathan Nash. Bet that happens more than once a day to you. Nathan Nash,
it does.
Staff attorney and tongue twister incarnate in the FTC's Midwest region, and he's giving us some tips on phone scammers and how to deal with them. And my next question was, if you find that you have gone down the road with a phone scammer or a mail scammer, what can you do, if anything? What should you do? Should you just kiss your money goodbye? Should you report it? I found that when I've started to report things, there's no place to really realistically report them to. What should people do?
Yeah, I would say reporting it to the Federal Trade Commission is often useful. We have a website, ftc.gov, but to report fraud, you can go to reportfraud.ftc.gov, and there's a form to fill out to describe what happened to you. We get a copy, and then the system also gives you a plan of what to do. And I would say once you report it, which is useful because we rely on those reports to do our work and find what scams are happening. It's important to act quickly. Often, if you've been, it's often advantageous to pay by credit card because you can stop the charge or dispute the charge if you've been a victim of a scam.
Yes.
Or to pay, by a check. Sometimes you have a limited window to stop payment on the check. Rather than if you pay by cash or wire transfer, there's often a very small window or none to get that money back.
What are the top 5 scams that you are hearing about right now, even if they're old faithfuls? What are the best ones?
They are a lot of old faithfuls. I would say they're generally, a lot of them are, the most common, and there are a bunch of different flavors of it, are imposter scams. So where folks impersonate often the government. The Federal Trade Commission is often impersonated as the IRS and the FBI. Also, companies.
What do they say? Wait, what do they say? What is the FBI? Is this the one where they tell you your nephew's in jail? Is that the one?
That might be one of them. I think a lot of them are saying, your money your accounts have been compromised. Please send us your money and we'll protect it. Which the government does not do. We don't do that. So don't
darn it.
Give us your money. Yeah.
Just pay your taxes. That's all we ask, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yes, right.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then legitimate companies, kind of what I was like USPS, Microsoft, like a tech support scam. Your computer's been compromised. Please, give us your information or give us money and we can fix it. It's not Microsoft. It's a scammer often. There's the evergreen grandparent scam where grandparent gets a call from supposed grandchild saying they're in distress and they need money now. That's kind of been helped by voice cloning that can sometimes clone the voice of a grandchild and make it seem more realistic. But I think in all of these, there's a sense of urgency, and it's important to, instead of trusting the person on the other end of the phone is from the IRS or from Microsoft or a family member, don't trust the urgency. You have time to hang up and do your own due diligence and call that grandchild or, call Microsoft or
Sweetheart, are you really in jail in Berkeley, Illinois? Sweetheart, are you all right? Actually, I will tell you, a friend of mine who just retired from a big deal attorney general's office in California, worked directly from the former candidate. Her mother got fleeced. And actually, sometimes the people who are writing out the money orders, when they see it's an older person, they'll say, are you sure you want to do this? That's a popular scam. We don't think you should be. Her mother was turned down at the Western Union counter of a very large retailer, and some helpful jerk behind her mother said, they'll write, you can do that at the other large box store across the street. So it happens, but it almost happened to my kid. And that makes me want to ask you, how can you bomb-proof your kids from these kinds of things? What should you be telling them? Because my kid came downstairs. This was a long time ago. He's an adult now, but he came downstairs and he said, Mom, I want to know your birthday. And I said, first of all, how come you don't know my birthday? And second of all, why do you want to know my birthday now, 6 months from my birthday? And he said, well, there's a man on the phone who says there's a virus in my gun. I'm like, okie dokie, let's just hang that up right now. But they will make their way in any way that they can, I'm guessing. And kids all have phones now. So What do they do to the kids, and what can you say to the kids about phone scams?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the same rules apply to tell your kids that, if they get a call out of the blue, not to trust that it is who they say it is. With these imposter scams, they often trade on the trust that, Microsoft or the government have. And so it's important not to, volunteer information on a call that you get out of the blue. If you have any doubt, it's usually okay to hang up and then call a number that is associated with Microsoft or associated with the government, and do it from your own end rather than trusting the person on the other end of the line is who they say they are.
And for Pete's sakes, don't go meet anybody.
Yeah, exactly. Or give money to someone who drives by in a car. Yeah,
don't get even close to the car. Don't do that. So do you see any hope coming down the pike as far as actually closing down or monitoring or getting on top of some of these scams? Because they just seem to be, is it my imagination, or are they proliferating? Has technology helped us, or is it of no use at all in knocking these things back?
I think it is a game of whack-a-mole. I think there's something I forgot to mention earlier, but to put your name on the National Do Not Call Registry, if you aren't already, that's been a big help to cut down on the number of calls folks get who are on it. You can do that at donotcall.gov.
How often do you have to re-up that?
I think once you're on it, it should be on. There was a period when it used to be re-up, but you can always check whether you're still registered. They have a free kind of check. So you can just enter your number and make sure it's entered on the registry.
So you can put yourself on the do not call list. That's one thing you can do. What else?
I would say you can sign up for consumer alerts. We tried it because you're right that scammers are constantly evolving and using new technology. You know, like text message scams have become more and more of a thing in the past few years. So you can stay up to date by signing up for consumer alerts from the FTC. And you can also log on to consumer.ftc.gov, where we try to publish stories about the most common scams.
Oh, that is so useful. I remember. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I got some phishing scam that sounded like almost plausible, and I put it in and wrote the basic scam and wrote, is this a scam? And sure enough, there it is. You know, people from all over on Reddit and Quora and the FTC going, this is in fact a scam. I don't even remember what it was, but it was so plausible. It was like, yeah, that could be. I'll just check. But the most, and then hilariously, one time I did get a note from the post office, and I actually did have a package. So my husband was like, yeah, that's a scam you have. I would also recommend informed delivery. Mm-hmm. That way, if someone's really sending you a package, you can find that out before it comes. And I have to just ask you on a personal level, two things. What's the scam where you've gone, well, that is really creative? I would give them the prize for the most creative scam. And the other one is, do you watch those YouTube videos where people scam the scammer right back and have some fun with them? Do you ever see those?
Well, there's the same question I have, and those are pretty fun to watch. I'm not as creative, but I love getting ideas from folks who are more creative than me.
Yeah, there was one guy who made one of these, I'll fix the virus in your computer, and he set up a completely fake computer with nothing in it of any value, and the guy's like, it's like in your computer where I can correct the software. And he's like, no, you're virtually linked to my computer, but you can't get to anything that's in here. You're just moving the mouse around. But it took him a while to unmask himself, and in the meantime, again, wasted a lot of people's time. So those are fun to watch, by the way, and I would recommend, if you are scammed, that as a sort of a bomb, that you watch some of those, and then you think, okay, well, it doesn't work every time, and sometimes you can humiliate them. I knew one guy who said that a friend of his met somebody at the airport and then pretended he didn't know why he was there. Oh, money? I was supposed to bring money? And that was fun. But what is the scam that you have looked at and thought, well, this is really good, points for creativity?
Well, I can say a scam that I myself have fallen for.
No, really?
Yeah.
Okay,
we all do. I think that's important. That we all fall for them. It's just hard to be on guard 24/7. But someone that emailed from what appeared to be my boss's email and said, I'm caught up in a meeting. Can you go out and run an errand for me? And I got pretty far down the road before he said, well, I need to get $500 Amazon gift cards, and that was kind of what started to set up alarm bells. But I got pretty far, and he had my boss's name, and he knew I worked for him, and that this was a plausible thing that might be happening until the gift card thing. So that was pretty creative.
What did you think when you were standing in line? And I mean, where were you when he said, "I need the Amazon gift cards"?
I was actually home. It was in 2020, so I was home, and I was about to run out and say, and it was I just started the job, so I was like, this is the way I could impress him. I mean, it really hit me at the right time.
Nathan Nash, I love you for that. That is just so sweet. You were going to impress your boss by bailing him out and getting how many Amazon gift cards did they want?
I think it was $500. It was fun.
I'm impressed. So you're just like that guy, Cy Sperling. You're not only the owner of Hair Club, you're also a member.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for your time today. I hope you have a safe, secure, and not too vulnerable holiday season. Thanks a lot. You've been fun.
Thanks. Same to you. And thanks for everyone listening.
All right. Protect yourselves. Hang up and don't click. That's my advice to you. Don't click and don't and hang up, and nobody's giving you anything. Bupkis, nada, nothing. There is no prize. Patty Vasquez will be here just a little after 5 o'clock. It's been fun. I'll see you again. Turi Ryder on WCPT.